And hello guys, welcome to the very first live stream of the Dongfang Hour. I'm Jean Deville, the host of this YouTube channel. And as you know, this YouTube channel focuses on the Chinese space program. Just let me know in the comments section if you can hear me okay, if the microphone is working fine, and if anything is wrong, I can still tweak things as we move forward. So today, just to give you an idea of how things are going to unfold, we're roughly going to be spending 2 hours together. There's going to be the launch in roughly 1 hour and 20 minutes. I added a countdown on the upper left of the screen. And yeah, basically, I'm going to be commenting for roughly an hour what the Wentian experimental module actually is, you know, what the Chinese space program, the crewed space program, is all about. We'll discuss a little bit the Wentian, the Wenchang Space Launch Center. We'll talk also a little bit about the Long March 5B, which is the rocket that will be launching the Wentian Space Laboratory today. So if you have time. Excellent. Thanks for all the messages. Great, loud and clear. Great. Excellent. Also, feel free to ask any questions in the chat during this live stream. I can do some short Q&A sessions whenever there are some down times during this live stream. And after 1 hour of presentation on Wentian, we'll move on to restream perhaps either the CCTV or the CGTN live stream, so we can listen to the panel of experts over there, or we can also, I sometimes also comment over what they're saying, and so we can watch together the launch of this pretty important milestone in China's space program. All right, guys. Also, feel free to just say where you guys are watching from and where you're from. Where maybe if you're an English speaker, if you're a Mandarin speaker, it's always really interesting to see the diversity of people that are interested in China's space program. All right, guys, let's move on to a presentation. And again, feel free to ask any questions. I have a few interesting visuals and documents to show you guys before we switch on to CCTV or CGTN. So what you can see here is China's space station. This is the completed space station. Now, this is not what is currently in orbit at the moment. This should be what the Chinese space station will look like at the end of the year. And so what's in orbit actually at the moment is only the Tianhe core module, which is the module that you can see here with the Chinese flag on it. You have the Tianzhou cargo spacecraft that's docked to the rear docking port, and you have a Shenzhou 14 that's docked radially. But those two big modules that you can see on the left and right of this space station, these are not launched yet. Those are Wentian and Mengtian. All right, and so moving forward, let's discuss a little bit China's crewed spaceflight program, because this space station is a massive space station. And this was not done in just a couple of years. This was done over a period of 30 years. And everything started out in the early 1990s, in 1992, when China launched its crewed spaceflight program called Project 921. Now, China did do some did have a crewed space program previously in the late 60s and 70s called Shuguang that was canceled. So I'm leaving the earlier programs out. Let's focus on the modern crewed spaceflight program called Project 921. So it started out in the early 1990s, and there was a first phase for roughly 10 years where China was basically developing the fundamental infrastructure, the means to send astronauts to space. And so that's typically the Shenzhou spacecraft that you can see here. This is something that was launched for the first time in 1999, uncrewed, and then crewed in 2003. And they also, you can see that it looks a little bit like the Soyuz architecture. The Chinese went for a more conservative approach for the design of their first crewed spacecraft. This spacecraft so far has been working flawlessly, very reliable. It's been launched 14 times between 1999 and today. We're right now at the Shenzhou 14 mission. And alongside the Shenzhou spacecraft, so the crewed spacecraft, the Chinese also had to develop a human-rated rocket. And so what this looks like is this. This is the Long March 2F. This was launched also for the first time in 1999. And this is derived from an existing rocket, which is the Long March 2E. And so what the Chinese did was basically they added several levels of redundancy, as well as an escape system that you can see at the top, this sort of pointing thing at the top with some nozzles for solid-fueled engines, which can pull the astronauts to safety should anything go wrong with the launch, either on the ground, but also as the rocket is climbing. Here's another shot of the Long March 2F rocket here in the vertical assembly building. Very, very cool rocket, and it's very easy to recognize thanks to its launch escape system. Okay, and then so once the Chinese had developed Shenzhou and the Long March 2F, they launched their first crewed mission in 2003. This was the Shenzhou 5 mission, sending Yang Liwei, the astronaut that you can see here, into low Earth orbit. And this worked out pretty well. Yang Liwei orbited the Earth a couple of times, and then he returned to the ground. You can see him here. There's the support team on the ground that's carrying him out of the crewed capsule that you can see a little bit in the background. Now, Yang Liwei, just sort of as a fun fact, so Yang Liwei, he's today around probably close to 60 years old, and he's a very important person that you see a lot in interviews, or if you just follow the Chinese space program, because he's today he's the deputy chief engineer of China's crewed spaceflight program. You might even catch a glimpse, who knows, of him in today's live stream. So that's Yang Liwei. You see him today. This is what he looks like. So definitely a few additional wrinkles compared to 2003. Yep. Very, very important guy to know about. And so that marks the end of phase one of China's crewed spaceflight program. We're in roughly 2003, 2004. And now China, for the phase two, had to build technologies to be able to sustain a long-term stay in space in low Earth orbit. And so that's typically a spacesuit to perform extravehicular activity or spacewalk. And this is what you can see here. This is the Shenzhou 7 mission. I believe it's Zhai Zhigong. So this is in 2008. He's performing the first EVA. He's waving the flag, the Chinese flag. And there were other technologies such as performing spacewalks and, rendezvous and docking. And so what the Chinese did was they developed two small experimental space stations called Tiangong 1 and Tiangong 2, and they practiced docking with them. And this is what you can see here with the Shenzhou spacecraft that's docking with one of them. There's another illustration that's here just to give you an idea. And finally, there's a very important spacecraft that was also developed during this period. It's the Tianhe cargo spacecraft. And cargo is really, I see I'm hiding a little bit the image here. I'm just hiding the camera for a sec. This Tianhe cargo spacecraft is very important because when you are, when you have a space station permanently in space, well, you need to resupply on a regular basis. For example, that's with water, for drinking water naturally, but also you can perform the electrolysis of water to produce oxygen. You need to, replenish the stock of fuel. You need also to provide experiments, payloads, so that astronauts can perform space sciences. And you need also to provide food. So there are a lot of things that are critical with this Tianhe cargo spacecraft. And also you need to deorbit waste from the astronauts every now and then naturally. And that's basically the end of phase 2. I just saw that there was some very nice super thanks that are coming in. Thanks, Lexi, for your support, as well as Tepuranga Hemeraya, Yeni Zhang. Thank you so much for your support. It's really helpful for the channel, and it's going to be used one way or the other to improve the quality of incoming videos. So thank you so much for your support. And just going back to Tianzhou here, so this marks the end of the second phase of China's crewed spaceflight program. We're in 2017, and at this point, there's sort of, from an external point of view, you don't see anything going on anymore. And the main reason for that, there's a pause for several years. And that's because in 2017, there was the failure of the Long March 5 rocket. And the Long March 5, as we'll see today, I mean, it's a very critical rocket. It's the main workhorse to launch the big modules of the Chinese space station. And so they had a problem with that. They took a couple of years to figure out what was wrong. Something was wrong, notably, with the YF-77 hydrolox engine. And in 2019, at the end of 2019, they had made modifications to the rocket, and so it returned to flight. And so phase 3 of the Chinese crewed space program really starts in 2020, 2021, where the idea of the phase 3 is to deploy and to assemble the Chinese space station. And so we're actually in the middle of phase 3 at this very moment. It started last year with the launch of the Tianhe core module in April. And this year we're supposed to see the two remaining modules, Wentian and Mengtian. So Wentian to be launched in in roughly 1 hour. And Mengtian should be launched in October 2022. And so by the end of the year, we'll see the fully assembled Chinese space station. And this is this is a thumbnail of a previous video where you can see Tianhe that's already docked. And then there's Mengtian and Wentian that are going to dock to the starboard and the port side docking ports of the Chinese space station. All right, and so let's have a look at what the Chinese space station looks like today. So this is the final version at the end of the year, but what's in space today is the Tianhe core module that you can see here. It's highlighted. You also have Shenzhou, that's Shenzhou 14, that's docked to the radial docking port, and you have Tianzhou 4 that's docked to the back. You don't have the big modules on the left and on the right. Okay, and so I want to talk a little bit about Tianhe, even though it's not what's being launched today. This is already in orbit. It was launched last year, because there are also some similarities with Wentian, and it's nice to give a bigger picture of everything. So just giving a quick look at what's going on in the chat. Thank you so much, Wendy, Lee, Wagner, Jeff Wen, R3D Powell. Thank you so much for your support. R3D Powell, I see what Wentian is about, so I'll answer that in just 5 minutes. Let me go over Tianhe first, and then we'll do a deep dive into Wentian, what Wentian actually is. Science, tech, engineering, and math. I see you're asking what kind of experiments are done in a space station. So we'll cover the experimental racks that are on board the Chinese space station, on board Wentian, in also just around 10 minutes. So do stay tuned for that. This is planned. All right, so let's move forward with Tianhe. Really exciting stuff. So this is the Tianhe core module. So naturally, you can see that this is an illustration. It's built with sort of 3 subsections. You have the front multi-docking nod where incoming spacecraft dock to. You have a smaller cylindrical module, and you have a larger cylindrical module. And of course, you have the solar arrays. You have here an actual picture of what Tianhe looks like when it was in various testing facilities. I think this is in Wenchang or in Tianjin, but I think this is in Wenchang as it was being fully assembled. And actually, we have a 3D model that we made specially for Dongfang Hour. So check this out. This is going to be really great to discuss what is on Tianhe. I hope you can see this. This is a 3D model that's made with SketchUp. So let me just make sure that things are visible here. Let me know if you can see it well. So this is the Tianhe core module. Let me try and move things around. A bit of a technical issue. I don't know why it's not wanting to move. Apologies for this. Oh, there we go. Here's the orbiting tool. Okay, so let's look at what's on the Tianhe core model. Just a quick reminder for those who are just tuning in. This is not what's being launched today. This was what was launched last year. I'm commenting this for 5 minutes before moving on to Wentian because there are similarities. Okay, and so at the front, you have the multi-docking nod that's here. And so incoming spacecraft will be docking to these docking ports. You have a front side docking port, which is where which is where Shenzhou docks to, the crewed spacecraft, but also Tianzhou can dock here. You have the radial docking port at the bottom, and here it's only Shenzhou that can dock here. Tianzhou doesn't have the necessary systems to dock to this radial docking port. And then you have 2 docking ports on the side, on the starboard and on the port side. And these are actually not exactly docking ports. They're more berthing ports, meaning that the incoming spacecraft, they cannot just dock directly to it. They need to first dock to the front docking port that's here, and then they use a robotic arm to sort of pull themselves to one of the side docking ports. And this is what Wentian will be doing, actually, not immediately, not today, but it will first dock with the front docking port before pulling itself to the side. Okay, and what's at the top here is actually a hatch. This is because the multi-docking nod is actually an airlock chamber, and so astronauts can perform spacewalks by opening the hatch that you can see here. And then next you have this small cylindrical module, and this small cylindrical module, this is the living quarters of the Chinese, of the Tianhe core module. There are 3 sleeping quarters, and so this is where the Shenzhou 14 crew, there are 3 astronauts at the moment, are sleeping. And it's also, what you can see here is solar arrays, and these solar arrays are very important. They're about 12 point something meters long. And it's critical because you really need a lot of electrical power to power a Chinese space station. It's not just to keep the lights on. You have propulsion systems that are powered with electrical power. You have control moment gyros, which are these odd-looking round spheres at the front here, which are there to sort of control the attitude of the spacecraft. They're fast-spinning disks that you can sort of spin around the entire Tianhe core module. You need to power, there are also Hall effect thrusters that use electrical power. You have communication systems, and you can actually see a relay antenna that's here and that communicates with a relay satellite that then communicates with a ground station in China. This relay antenna is actually really interesting, and I'll talk about it when I talk about Wentian because there's sort of a connection. Wentian also has a relay communications antenna. Okay. And then we have the larger cylindrical module that is here. And this is also very important. You have actually two sections, subsections. You have the yellow part that's the sort of the working area, and at the back this is the resources or the propulsion section where the propellant is stored. And naturally you can see that there are a lot of nozzles for engines. These are reaction control thrusters. They send for a very short amount of time short bursts of of propulsion, of thrust, to either for orbital control, either for attitude control. Yeah, very important part as well. And finally, we have the rear docking port that's here. So generally, it's either the Tianhe cargo spacecraft that docks to this back docking port here. It's also the Wentian telescope starting from 2024 that could dock here. Wentian being this massive sort of Chinese version of Hubble space telescope that has the the unusual possibility to dock to the Chinese space station for servicing, as opposed to Hubble, where you needed to have a space shuttle to service, the space telescope. So this is overall an overview of Tianhe, a very interesting spacecraft, and the core module of the Chinese space station. This is the command center. It's going to be commanding everything, even when the whole Chinese space station is assembled. And yeah, so just giving a quick look at the chat before moving on to Wentian, guys. How are things going? Is everything... I see some... thanks, Victor Z, for your support. Really, really helpful. Hi from New Zealand, Jamie Steam. Hi to you as well. Someone from Lima, Peru. Hi, it must be late in the evening for you guys. From Singapore, Mexico. Wow, lots of different nationalities and countries here. There's China, naturally. Hong Kong. Very cool. A quick question that I see here: how long between launching and docking? So I'm not exactly sure, but I heard that the Wentian Space Laboratory will be following a sort of a fast docking procedure. Fast docking for Shenzhou and Tianzhou is less than 10 hours today, and so possibly it'll be the same for Wentian. So the stream will probably not last that long, but yes, we should be expecting the Wentian Space Laboratory to be docking to the front docking port of Tianhe probably in less than 10 hours. All right, guys. I'm moving on now to the Wentian Space Laboratory. So maybe looking a little bit more at some quick visuals, and before moving on to the 3D model. So this is what Wentian looks like. This is what this is the an illustration that was shown a couple of months ago of the Wentian Space Laboratory. The Chinese space program is actually not that generous in sharing illustrations, unfortunately, of Wentian. We did get some nice images over the past 2 days, but overall, for the past months, they've been, I don't really know why, but they don't really share a lot of images, but you do get some of them. So this is one of them, and we've managed to rebuild a 3D model based on what we can see from these illustrations. Here's an actual picture, low resolution image that was shared also a couple of months ago of Wentian, where you can see a lot of details, and that we're going to see now directly with the 3D model, because 3D models are just that much more cool. And this is Wentian. So Wentian, actually, if you're not very familiar with this module, it might look a little bit similar to Tianhe, because you have 3 sections as well. You have this large cylindrical section, you have a smaller cylindrical section, and then you have this sort of resource module at the very end. Now, there are some very important differences nevertheless, so let's just describe a little bit what we're seeing here on the surface. First of all, with this large cylindrical module. So Wentian, naturally, as mentioned, is going to dock to Tianhe in less than 24 hours, and it'll be docking with this docking port that you can see over here. So once it's docked, astronauts will be entering Wentian through this docking port that you can see here. Okay, and then what we have here, this big cylindrical module, is very important because this is the main working station, basically. In here, you'll have, first of all, 3 additional sleeping quarters, and that's pretty important because What this means that the Chinese space station will be able to have 6 astronauts simultaneously. And so even though this won't be a long-term thing for the Chinese space station, there won't be 6 astronauts on the space station for months and months. What this is for is that, when there are 3 astronauts on board, usually they'll stay for a period of 6 months. And when the Chinese send an additional crew of 3 astronauts to replace the current 3 on the space station, well, there are a couple of days where these 2 Shenzhou crews of 3 astronauts can coexist on the Chinese space station, each occupying the 3 sleeping quarters of each model. So Tianhe and Wentian. But there's no plan for 6 astronauts long-term on the Chinese space station. And you also have in here experimental racks. So this is really the main thing, the main compartment that's going to be used for space sciences on Wentian. You will have, there are actually spaces for 8 experimental racks, and 4 will be occupied for a start with today's launch. There'll be 4 experimental racks that I'll get into in detail in just a bit. So 4 experimental racks and the sleeping quarters. And actually, I don't know if the 3D modeler I was working with showed it here, but normally you can see that there are some windows here on the side. It's probably what he tried to do here. I'm not sure, but there are some windows. So the sleeping bunks are more, towards this side, and the experiments are more close to the docking port that's here. Okay, and so this is for space sciences inside Wentian. Now, the next part of this module, which is here, this is absolutely interesting as well, because this small cylindrical module is used for space sciences, but on the outside. And what you can see here with these attachment points these are attachment points. These small rectangles are attachment points for experiments. There are roughly 22, I believe, attachment points, and you can attach experiments directly to these attachment points. But not only is this to fix your system to the outside, but these are they have an additional level of sophistication where you can basically provide power to your experiment. If it's an active experiment, you can also have thermal control, because if your experiment is on the outside, there's a lot of thermal cycling depending on if you're in the shadow, so it's very cold, or if you're in sunlight, and so it's very hot. There's a thermal control system to mitigate that. And you also have a data bus, typically, to download all the data that's going on in the experiment directly to the Chinese space station, and so you can monitor things from inside the Chinese space station. Now, a good question could be, how do astronauts put these experiments on the outside on these attachment points? And one logical way would be, remember that airlock hatch that's with the Tianhe core module. They could perform a spacewalk and then open that hatch and sort of manually crawl to this area, to these attachment points. And you can see that there are handles all over the Chinese space station, these red handles, and so they can sort of slowly move all the way to this point and attach their experiments. But they can also come through a new airlock module that is just here, that's at the bottom. And this is an alternative airlock. It's actually going to be the main airlock chamber and the main hatch for the Chinese space station. It's going to replace the Tianhe core module airlock chamber for 2 reasons. The first one is that, first of all, I believe it's bigger, so you can fit more things. They'll be more comfortable climbing out of here, and it's naturally closer to these attachment points. The second one is that the Tianhe core module, the multi-docking nod, which is also an airlock, it's at the center of all the space station. All the modules of the Chinese space station are docked to this multi-docking nod. And so if you're performing a spacewalk with this airlock chamber, I suppose that you're condemning that multi-docking nod for the whole period of the spacewalk, meaning that astronauts inside, those that are staying inside, they can't move from one module to another. And so naturally, if you're doing it with Wentian, you're just condemning this module that's situated at the tip of a Chinese space station module. So you're not affecting a circulation of people between modules of the Chinese space station. So I think that's probably the main reason. And then finally, you have probably the most clever way, which is this robotic arm that you can see here. And so this is a 5-meter long robotic arm with multiple degrees of liberty. And this can actually help astronauts. It can it can move astronauts around, or it can also take experiments and then put them on a specific attachment point. So it's here to help astronauts do what they have to do as they perform their spacewalk and manipulate these experiments. And this robotic arm is actually very interesting. For those who follow the Chinese space program, you'll know that the Tianhe core module also has a robotic arm. It's actually the main robotic arm of the Chinese space station. It's 10 meters long. And so these two robotic arms can actually merge and form this massive 15-meter long robotic arm for more sophisticated manipulations if necessary. These robotic arms are also very helpful for other tasks. They can help move incoming spacecraft from one docking port to another as a backup. They have high definition cameras so you can monitor what's going on outside. The intro, if you were watching from the very beginning, the intro of this live stream, this was images mostly coming from the camera of the robotic arm of the Tianhe core module. So very, very cool stuff, very helpful stuff. And you also have similar systems on the ISS to help astronauts do what they have to do. Another interesting feature of this robotic arm is that it can move around, it can crawl. And so what does this mean? Over the whole Chinese space station, you'll see these little circles, these dark circles, and these are actually attachment points for the robotic arm. And so since it has each end of the robotic arm is, it's something that can attach to these attachment points. And so it can attach to an attachment point and then sort of move to another one. And I think in Chinese, they call this crawling, or it's translated as crawling. And so that's also something that's pretty cool to watch. And now, as promised, there is the relay antenna of Wentian. So let me just briefly explain what this is for and what's the connection with Tianhe. Just looking at the chat really quickly to see if things are all good. Jay Wong, thank you for your support. Again, really appreciated. Also, let me sorry guys, just going through some of the chat. Lu Mingshen, thank you so much. Jamie Steam saying, Jean-Deville, could you cover a few ways in which the technology of a space station is involved or improved from the ISS or Mir? Yes, I can cover that in just a bit. Actually, I'll cover that just after I just go through this chat. So, people from Germany, Tianhe, Canada, Tusanjiao. So people coming from, what's the translation? The Pearl River Delta in China. People coming from the US. Very cool to see. Thank you. Thank you also. Oh, this is an anonymous tip. Thank you so much. Watching from Canada. There's discussion also on the moon base. During the Q&A at the end, I can also discuss the moon base. It's not the core topic here, so I'll leave it for the end. But yeah. Let's move forward. So India, hi from India. Really nice to see you guys here. I believe the next TW LAMSIS, I believe the next Chinese space project should be the Space Telescope. It's already in preparation, actually. The Space Telescope is planned for launch in 2024. They had previously said the end of 2023. So yeah, basically in 2 years. That were released a couple of weeks ago of the integration of the optical part, and that's pretty cool. I heard China sending man to moon in 2027. Is that true? Actually, it's the lunar rocket that's supposed, the Long March 5 DY, that's supposed to be launched around for the 2026 at the earliest, 2027. The actual lunar mission, crewed lunar mission, is planned more for 2030. So it's not in the immediate future just yet, but coming in the coming decade. Let me just see some other points. You are doing great. Thanks, Brendan, Tony. People from Ethiopia, Malaysia, really cool. Are you in the States? No, I'm actually in Paris. I'm based in France at the moment. I used to be in China. I used to be in Shenzhen, and now I'm based in Paris. Hi, Farby from Bangladesh, Denmark. Very cool stuff. Wendy's saying, watching on CGTN2, they just went live. Yes, I also have them on a separate screen just here. I will restream them once we are close to the launch. I still have 46 minutes approximately to the launch. Now, the issue is that I heard that CGTN issues copyright strikes or copyright claims if you restream them now. I know that Rocket Guyan, who's also a great streamer with launches more generally, he got a copyright claim for restreaming CGTN. So I'm not sure I want to do that. I might do CCTV instead, but you know, if you have any thoughts about that, just feel free to leave a comment, and I'm happy to hear what you think. Do I thank you very much for your support. That's really, really helpful. Jason, Yo Pun Lee as well. Thank you so much for your support. Really, really nice to hear. Nice to see. Sorry. Stefan C is also asking about the Starry T-shirt. This is this is just the space shuttle that's in this, you know, the Starry Night. Very famous drawing. This was just repurposed for rockets. Something just like I got online. There's very nice NASA merch that I found online. Okay, guys, moving back to Wentian, and then I'll go back to the questions. Sorry, just one sec. Okay, and so I was talking about the relay antenna that you can see here, and this is a very important point to mention, because the way it works when you're in low Earth orbit, and taking the viewpoint of China here, China has ground stations in China, and it has a few ground stations abroad, but really not that many. It also has ships called Yuanwang that act as ground stations in the sea, but they definitely don't cover the entire planet. And so the issue is when you have a spacecraft in low Earth orbit that orbits the Earth every 90-ish minutes, well, you have large blackout moments because you're not communicating, you're not flying over China or a Chinese ground station. And so to work that out, what space programs generally do, this is what Europe does, this is what the US does, this is what, and this is what China has been doing as well. You can deploy a constellation of relay satellites in geostationary orbit. These are called the Tianhe satellites. In the case of China, they actually launched just a new one a couple of weeks ago. And the idea is with just 3 or 4 satellites, which are very far from the Earth, they're in geostationary orbit. Basically, with just 3 or 4 geostationary relay satellites, you can communicate with a spacecraft in LEO, because at any point you have at least one geostationary satellite that's in contact with the satellite that's in LEO. And so once you communicate with the relay satellite, then the relay satellite broadcasts that to a ground station over China. And so that tends to work great. And so in theory, you would have 100% coverage, and so you'd have continuous communications with the Chinese space station with just one antenna, the one on the Tianhe core module. But this is not the case, because what happens is that you always have that solar, either the solar panels of the Tianhe core module or the body of the Tianhe core module, at some point that masks the direct line of sight with the antenna, between the antenna and the relay satellite. And so in practice, I believe that the Tianhe core module communicates with ground stations in China 90 to 95% of the time, but there are still some small blackout zones. And so what this second antenna here on Wentian actually brings is that you have a second antenna. And with that second antenna, even if one antenna is blocked for some reason, there's no simultaneous occultation of 2 antennas. And so with this, you really have finally truly 100% coverage of, of communication, continuous communication with ground stations in China. This is a very important piece of hardware. This is one of the first things that will be deployed once Wentian is launched on board the Long March 5B. Okay, and you also have the solar panels, and I'm going to finish on this point. These solar panels, by the way, they're not to scale, unfortunately, when we made this, because unfortunately we didn't know the length of these solar arrays. This information was not publicly available, but this was published 2 days ago. This is actually the full wingspan is wait for it, 55 meters long. That is absolutely massive. So it's way larger than what you can see here. Just to give you an idea, the body of the Wentian experimental module is about 17.9 meters long. And so these solar panels, 55 meters, they're way bigger than what you can see here. And it's really important to have big solar panels because, because again, as mentioned just now, you need a lot of electrical power to power, thrusters, attitude control systems, environment control, life support systems, and also, very importantly, in these experimental modules, you're going to start to have a lot of experimental racks, and these require a lot of power. And so, as we'll see later on when I describe them in detail, this is what these panels are for. And I believe that these panels, they produce, I think, 7 kilowatts of power. So that's quite a bit of power. And 2,000 watts of those 7.3 kilowatts are dedicated to the experiments, I believe. Now, there was a question just now saying, what are the improvements of the Chinese space station over the ISS? And Mir and the other space stations. So I don't know all of them. We're learning more and more as time progresses and as China reveals details on the Chinese space station. So, but one of them that's really noteworthy is these solar arrays. So first of all, they use this sort of flexible material. It's not these solid solar arrays that deploy, and unfold. These are flexible, and they sort of fold up together. They look like a thin film, basically. And the advantage of this is, first of all, it's much lighter. It also takes up much less space when they're folded up. And thirdly, this new technology that's used for the solar panels have extremely high efficiency. I believe the efficiency is 30%, which is pretty high for solar panels. And so I think this is the advantage. This is what we can call the latecomers advantage. So, by launching the space station now, China is able to put really the latest technologies, the state of the art of 2022 into its space station modules. And so this is the case for the solar panels, and it's probably the case for, for all the electronics that are on board and that use, the latest semiconductors, the latest chips, compared to ISS modules that are, it's a design that dates back to the 90s and 2000s. So you expect that there'd be a technological gap from that standpoint. Okay, and so this is the Chinese space station's Wentian experimental module. One last fun fact, sorry guys, I just have too many things to say on Wentian, is that you can see that there's a space here at the tip of Wentian that's not being used. And what's going to happen when the Chinese space station is fully assembled is that the Tianhe core module solar panels, the smaller ones, those won't work at full efficiency anymore, because with the full space station, you always have parts of the Chinese space station that will be masking the Tianhe core module solar arrays. And so a very, very cool feature of the Chinese space station is you can detach the solar arrays of the Tianhe core module. There's actually a robotic arm that can grab those smaller solar arrays, and then using a crawling system, it can move this solar array to the tip that's situated here. And so in the end, you'll sort of have a T-shaped structure of solar arrays at the tip of the Mengtian and the Wentian experimental modules, and you won't have any solar arrays anymore on Tianhe. So this is one of the big things that the Shenzhou 14 crew are going to have to do in the Shenzhou 15. So really important step here. And probably this is the moment where they'll be merging the two robotic arms, which is a feature that I mentioned just now with the robotic arms. Okay, I'm just going to move back to the presentation. Let me just check what the countdown is looking like at the moment. So my countdown's at 37 minutes. Let me see on one of the live streams if that countdown is correct. I think it is correct. I don't see the official countdown. Let me just wait a second. I see 29 minutes on other countdowns. So let me just take the time to adapt this. Give me a second. Let me know if what I'm doing here is correct. This is my first live stream, so I'm not exactly sure. But probably it should be at, yes, 2:12 p.m. Beijing time. So it should look like this. Let's see if this countdown looks correct. 29 minutes. Yes, this should be okay. All right, guys. Okay, guys, moving back to some of the visuals that I was showing. Let's wrap up on Wentian. Maybe I'll take a few questions before that. Lots of things going on in the chat that's very cool. Let me go through some of them. I think China will build another space station as a launch pad or Stargate to facilitate space travel to the moon. So they do have the ILRS. It's a Sino-Russian project that's meant to start. They're meant to start the construction phase in the early 2030s. So you have that. That should be a land-based lunar base as opposed to the Lunar Gateway, which is in orbit. Eric Liu says you can stream CCTV 13. Yes, I'm going to stream CCTV or CGTN really soon. Just want to cover a little bit Wenchang, and then I'll start streaming. Can the CSS be expanded in the future? Yes, it can be. This is A.B. Marcos's question. Actually, there have already been talks of expanding the Chinese space station. Yang Liwei, the first astronaut, by the way, that I mentioned earlier in the stream, he's the deputy chief designer of the crewed space program today, and he mentioned that just a couple of weeks ago that at the end of the 2020s, potentially the Chinese could double the size of the Chinese space station by docking, a second Tianhe core module and 2 additional experimental modules to the current 3-module space station, in which case the whole space station would become a 6-module station that would have a total mass of roughly 180 tons. That's starting to become a very big space station. 180 tons, this would, just to give you an idea of what this means, this is about half the weight of the ISS, which is around 400 tons. So yes, the expansion is discussed. It's not confirmed. Dodo Nan, Rocket Guy, and another great channel. Absolutely agree with you. Jason Yopen, impressed with your knowledge in China's space program. Thank you so much. Really happy to be sharing it with you guys today. Actually, sometimes there are viewers that also know things that I don't know, so feel free, if I missed any interesting points on the space station, to drop a comment and share with the others. Case, yep, exact hour of the launch. I'm actually not sure. I'm looking at a countdown here that I saw on Twitter that's 26 minutes. Let me know if my countdown on the upper left screen is incorrect. But anyway, on a separate screen, I'm monitoring what's going on CCTV and CGTN, so we won't miss the launch. And anyway, we'll switch to them in roughly 10 minutes. Launch is in about 2 p.m. What do we see? Pacifico, Dongfang Hour, best China space commentary on the internet. Thank you so much. There's a backup core module. Absolutely, there's a backup core module, and it's that one that presumably will be used to expand the Chinese space station at the end of the decade. Will you be able to travel to Hainan Spaceport for the launch? You seem to be in China. No, unfortunately, I'm in Paris at the moment, and COVID restrictions means that borders are closed, and so I can't go to Hainan to watch the actual launch. But once that is available, that would be absolutely cool to live stream with this telephoto lens, and then, to be broadcasting live what my camera is actually shooting rather than restreaming. That would be amazing. It'd be sort of what's going on in Boca Chica, where you have all these, YouTubers that are filming live what SpaceX is doing, and it'd be cool to have sort of a Chinese version of that. Jordan Randall, he's in Paris. Yes, indeed. What else do we have? They were in Hong Kong's past. He was in Shenzhen before. Moving forward, launch will begin in 20 minutes. Yes, I'm aware. Actually, I have 25 minutes. Again, let me know if the countdown is incorrect. All right, and that's all for the comments so far. Let's go back to some of the discussions here. So that's all I have on Wentian. Here you have a nice visual of what an EVA would look like on Wentian as astronauts are manipulating the attachment points that you can see here, and the robotic arm that's helping. This is the 2 robotic arms that are merged together. This is what it's looked like, and there's sort of an interface between the two that was put together by one of the previous Shenzhou crew. I think it was the Shenzhou 13 that took care of that. So this is what the merged robotic arm looks like. And oh yes, I just want to cover the experimental racks before moving on to talking about Wenchang. So there are roughly 14 to 16 experimental racks on the Chinese space station. So 14 to 16 because I think it really depends on how you count them. So you see that you have, let me just hide my camera because I'm hiding some of the text here. You can see that there are Tianhe, the core module that's in space at the moment, has some of them. There are 2 to 3. You have Wentian that has 4. Wentian can actually host 8, but so far there are only 4 that will be occupied for the moment. So it leaves space for further, an extension of that. And you have the Mengtian module that's at the bottom that will have 8 experimental modules. And so I just want to cover what's on Wentian for today. And this is what we can see here. So at the top, you have the experimental modules of Tianhe, the 3, so the human system, the medical sample analysis, the container-free materials test rack. That's for Tianhe, so I won't be covering that too much. Let's cover Wentian more specifically. And so on Wentian, you can see that, again, I'm going to hide my camera. You have 4 experimental modules, and this is where you'll have really all the life sciences stuff going on the Chinese space station. You have the life sciences ecosystem rack, the biotechnology rack, and what these are for is basically here you can grow microorganisms, you can grow cells, you can grow plants, and there's also the ability to, have small mammals grow. So I guess it would be potentially mice or animals like that. And there are also loads of instruments to monitor how these experiments are doing and processing them. So really a lot of the life sciences is taking place here. It's to see, typically in microgravity, how does life evolve? How do things age? And so this is also, these are experiments that are also going on the ISS. Life sciences space is really a core focus of space stations more generally. And so two modules linked to biology and life sciences, and then you have the variable gravity rack, which is a very interesting module as well, a rack, because when you're in space, when you're in a space station, you're in microgravity, you're experiencing 0G. And so this is a very special environment to see how things are going, but you may want to see how things evolve at various levels of accelerations and not just 0G, right? And so what this variable gravity rack is you have 2 rotors that are spinning, and you can make these rotors spin at variable speeds, and these rotors, the spinning speed, the rotation speed, then creates a centrifugal force which acts as artificial gravity. And you can see that these boxes, there are boxes on these rotors. They're actually boxes for experiments. You can define the amount of artificial gravity that you want in these rotors. So you can see how experiments, behave in 0G, but also in 0.2G, 0.5G, 1G. And I think it can go all the way up to 2G. So very cool. You have 2 rotors, so you can have 2 different values of artificial gravity simultaneously. Very cool stuff as well. And then finally, you have the final rack that's on the right. And this one's very interesting because you can see that all the other racks are really thematic. They're focused on something that's very specific. You have the humans, for example, on Tianhe, right? Human system and medical sample racks. These are focused on the human body. And then you have life sciences and biotechnology. It means what it means. On Wentian, you have variable gravity. Again, very specific. And then the isolation glove box and cryogenic storage rack. This is more of a transversal experimental rack where you can, it's useful for various things. So the isolation glove box, this is very straightforward. This is what you can see in many movies. It's when you want to really isolate yourself from what you're manipulating. And so, this is what the glove box is for, multiple purposes. And then you have the cryogenic storage rack, and this is like sort of the fridge, the Chinese space station's fridge for experiments. And it's a pretty sophisticated fridge because you have 3 compartments. You have one compartment that stores things at 4 degrees Celsius. You have minus 20 degrees Celsius, and you have minus 80 degrees Celsius. So a wide range of temperatures depending on what the astronauts are doing in terms of space sciences. And so that's all I have for today on the the experimental modules. We might see something or some talk during the restream. I just want to talk a little bit about Wenchang before moving on to the restream. Let me see if there are just some other questions. Stream CCTV. I feel that everyone's calling me to stream CCTV. Time to, yep, Centrio. Okay, growing crystal is ID in zero gravity. Yes, that's what it'll be for. Okay, let me just see what things are looking like at the moment. Making sure I don't actually miss the launch, but shouldn't be the case. Just give me a second. Making sure that all is fine. Arthur Powell says, can you talk about their next telescope? Yes, I can do that. In once the launch is done, we'll have some time for Q&A. I think I can focus on that at that point. Let me just see. Just checking the countdown is correct. Wait a second. Yes, I think it should be good. Should be good. I think we still have a good... I see 2:22 p.m. Beijing time, so I think we should be okay. We still have quite a bit of time before the actual launch. Okay, guys. All right, I want to talk about Wenchang because this is where the launch is going to take place. So for that, we're going to look at Google Earth. So just wait for it. Here we have Google Earth. Where is Wenchang for those who aren't familiar with the Chinese space program? Wenchang naturally is in China. And so you have China that's over here. China has 4 launch facilities. You have Jiuquan that's in Inner Mongolia. You have Taiyuan that's in Shanxi province. You have Xichang that's somewhere in Sichuan. And then you have Wenchang that's the southernmost launch site, and that's situated on this island of Hainan. Naturally, being at as much south as possible, as close to the equator as possible, gives an extra boost, especially when you're launching to geostationary orbit. Okay, and so it's the launch site is situated on the northeast of the island. This is where it's situated. You have the launch site that's situated here. You can see the infrastructure very clearly. It's actually called Wenchang because close to the Wenchang Space Launch Center, there's actually the city of Wenchang that's situated here. And so it's named after the closest city. It's not actually the closest urban area because if you zoom a bit, you have a sort of a urban area here called Longlo that the Chinese call a village or zhen. But actually, in reality, probably by international standards, non-Chinese standards, this is already a small town. At least definitely in Europe, this would be considered a town. And so the launch site is here. And you have a lot of space fans that actually come to the beaches over here because from here you can have a good view of the launch site. And I think there's actually a Hilton hotel somewhere, so you can see it here. Hilton, Wenchang, that's over here. And you can have a nice view, a nice balcony where you can view the launch directly in comfortable conditions, or you can directly go to the beaches. There are some... Hainan is pretty famous for these sandy white beaches they can see here. And so before zooming in and saying what we're seeing, just explaining how things are shipped to Wenchang. So the production and the test of the modules, of the rocket modules are done here in Tianjin. And so Tianjin is a large coastal city that's near Beijing in the north. And then these modules are shipped to the south all the way to Hainan. They're shipped to the Qinglan port harbor of Wenchang that you can see here. So this is Wenchang City, and naturally it's unloaded here. The modules of the rocket Long March 5B are unloaded on trucks, specific trucks, and so it goes to the Wenchang launch site. Then through road transportation, it drives slowly all the way to the Wenchang launch site. And so how is the Wenchang launch site built? You have the vertical assembly buildings that are situated here. You have 2. The one on the left, I presumably this is for the Long March 5, and on the right, this is for the Long March 7 and 8. And so things are shipped over here, and you have the rocket Long March 5B that was assembled days ago, weeks ago in this vertical assembly building. The payload, so the Wentian experimental lab, I believe here is the payload assembly and test area. So it was probably assembled here, put into the fairings, and then shipped to the vertical assembly building that's here. And oops, I forgot the camera. Yep, you can see me now. And so, yeah, it's shipped to the vertical assembly building. Everything is assembled here. And then you have the mobile launch platform, which carries the rocket then all the way to the launch site. And what you can see here, the long black line, are actually tracks. And so once you reach the launch site that's here, it's 2.8 kilometers away. And this mobile launch platform moves at maximum 2 kilometers per hour. So this is a very long trip, couple of hours. Once it crawls all the way to the launch site, well, things are ready for launch. There are a couple of days of preparation after that for things to be ready for a launch. And this is similar to what you have at, for example, at Kennedy Space Center in the US, where you also have a vertical assembly building, you have the launch site, you have a crawler that brings the rocket all the way to the launch pad. So very similar. What you can see here is also lightning protection systems, naturally to create a Faraday cage effect to protect the launch pad from any lightning strikes. You also have here it's fueling facilities because fueling is done directly on the launch pad, and so what is here presumably liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen facilities, storage areas, and you see the piping systems that can lead to the space station. That's to the space station, to the launch pad that's here. You also have the kerosene storage area that's here. And you actually notice there are two launch pads, right? This one on the left is for the Long March 5 rockets. And so this is the one that's being used today. And you have the other one that's here. This is more for the Long March 7 and the Long March 8. And just sort of as a fun fact, I want to mention that you have the, so Wenchang is here, and you don't actually see it on the satellite images on Google Maps here, but here it looks very rural because it's not a modern image, but the Chinese are starting to build additional launch pads over here. There's going to be a commercial launch pad that was kicked off a couple of weeks ago, and that's going to launch commercial launches on the Long March 8. There are also commercial companies like Deep Blue Aerospace and iSpace that have signed deals with Wenchang to launch from the Wenchang Launch Center. And so this could be probably the most important launch site of China in the coming years. It could become sort of the Cape Canaveral, the Kennedy Space Center of the East. And I'll be making a video actually in August really talking about the Wenchang Space Launch Center, because a lot of things are going on. And this launch site doesn't launch a lot today, but it's really going to replace progressively and become the main launch site for China, and probably the second most important launch site in the world, on par with the launch sites with Kennedy Space Center, Cape Canaveral in the US, based on all the important launches that are going to take place here. Okay, is there anything else to say on Wenchang? No, I think that is it for me. Just a fun thing you can do with Google, by the way. You can go back in time, I believe. If I go on view, I think there's historical imagery. So this is Wenchang in 2021. But if I move back to 2009, you can see that this was a rural area. There was nothing, and this shows that Wenchang is actually a very recent launch site. It dates back to I think the construction started in 2009, 2010, and so there was nothing back then. And today we have this operational launch site. Okay, guys, moving back here. So I prepared some things on the rockets, the Long March 5B. Do you want me to talk about that, or should we move on to the restream of a CCTV? It's up to you guys. Whichever one you prefer. Let me know. What it's looking like right now is this. Let me put it in big. There we have it. Let's see what they're talking about at the moment. So let's put on the one in Chinese.
对，第一次来，然后我们之前也做了一些攻略，看了一些攻略，然后发现实际的情况还是跟我们的这个攻略上看到的有所区别。
So what you're seeing here is they're interviewing tourists that are on the beaches, and you can see that the white sand beach is absolutely packed with people. Everyone's watching, going to Wenchang to launch the. To see the launch. And actually, I know that there are people that are traveling from different parts of China, all the way to Wenchang. There are WeChat groups, QQ groups that organize trips to Wenchang, and so that's very cool And the weather is magnificent. You see the Chinese people holding umbrellas because Chinese people don't like sunlight too much. So that's a very common sight when you're in China. Weather's magnificent, so that's great because for the Tianhe core module, the launch last year in April, weather wasn't so great. It was pretty gray. So it's nice to see that we have a nice blue sky. We're going to have excellent visuals for today's launch. Let's see what you guys are saying. Where can you see broadcast of the launch? Well, there's CCTV. You just type, if you want to see directly the CCTV launch, you can type CCTV, Wentian Live or CGTN Live, and you can find their live streams directly. Okay, 19 minutes for the launch. Excellent. I'm going to adapt my countdown here. Just wait a second. 19 minutes. That's really interesting to know. 18 minutes, 45, 44, 43, start. There. Now we should have the exact... Why is it not updating? Why is my countdown not updating? Sorry guys, just wait a sec while I update my countdown so you guys... Updating the countdown, just bear with me for a while. All right, guys, you now have really the exact countdown that they have on CCTV, so that's great. I have 18 more minutes to talk about various stuff. Let's comment a little bit what we're seeing here. Let me just answer a few questions, and let's comment what we're seeing. So lots of incoming questions and just nice comments. That's magnificent to see. Thank you so much for the supporters. Lingchen Zhang, that's a very generous donation. Thank you so much. We also have Ya Xiong Zhao. Wow, that's also very generous. Thank you so much for your support. Let's see if there are any other questions. Enrique says, I'm really grateful for your explanations. Thank you so much. I actually spent quite some time preparing this live stream. It's the first live stream, so wasn't sure about all the technicalities and need to get my facts right. But yeah, it's a fun thing to do. Curran M says Wenchang is now 34 degrees Celsius. Yeah, that sounds pretty hot. There's actually a heat wave in Europe at the moment, so 34 degrees is also what I'm experiencing over here. And in France and Europe, generally people don't have air conditioning. Thank you, Boyen, for your support. Thank you so much for your generous donation. You can talk about the Long March 5B, says R3D Powell. Excellent. I think I can talk about it with the live stream here because they're showing images of the rocket here. So I'll sort of improvise because I had some visuals, but I can I can just improvise on the rocket here. And so what we're seeing here is the fueling of the rocket. So fueling of the rocket actually happens significantly in advance. It happens several hours, maybe 8 or 9 or 10 hours before the actual launch. You cannot fuel the rocket earlier because it's cryogenic fuel that's being used. The core stage is using liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, and these are liquid only at very cold temperatures. And for the side boosters that you can see here, the 4 side boosters, it's powered by Kerlox engines, the YF-100 engines, which use liquid kerosene and liquid oxygen, which is not liquid at room temperature. So if you fueled in advance, then you would if it's fueled in advance, then you would have basically it would boil off really rapidly because, as mentioned by one of the viewers, it's 34 degrees out there in Wenchang, and so that just doesn't work. And you can see that it's fueling because you can see that white smoke coming out of the rocket core stage and the boosters. And what that is that the fueling. So for the Long March 5B, since it's a core stage and only one single first stage, there's no second stage of fueling, mainly is done from underneath the rocket or at the base, so we can't really see the fueling actually happening. But as you fuel with cryogenic fuels, some of the fuel, some of the propellant boils off because it's only cold at it's only liquid at very low temperatures. And as it boils off, it creates an increase of pressure in the tanks. And so you want to evacuate that excess pressure. And so there are valves that can vent out that excess pressure. And this is what you see. And this white vapor is actually not the propellant that's being vented out, because the propellant is transparent. It's just that this gas, despite being gaseous, it's very cold, and so when it goes into contact with the ambient air, which has humidity, which has water, especially since we're at the seaside, well, what happens is this humidity then instantly condensates, and so that's why you have the white clouds that are forming around these vent holes that you have, at the boosters for liquid oxygen, and also for the core stage for oxygen and also hydrogen. And this, I believe, the fueling should happen until, I believe, like a couple of minutes before the launch. So it's really fueled until the very last minute, so you can squeeze in as much propellant as possible as some of it is venting off. And so again, done at the last moment. And so we'll see, we won't see on the Long March 5B because the fueling is done from underneath the rocket. But on other rockets where there's fueling of the second stages, you can see the disconnection of the fueling, the cables that are connecting to the rocket. Now, a moment ago, I don't know if you noticed, there were black cables that were connected to the fairing. What this was, these are air conditioning cables, and there were also power cables that are on those orange arms that are now open. You can sort of see them. You can't see my cursor here, but you can see those orange arms around the fairing that are open. Basically, the fairing is powered by the launch pad up until 20 to 30 minutes each before the launch. And at that, and when we're close to the launch, so 20 minutes before, they're disconnected. And so that means that there's no more air conditioning that's provided by the launch pad. And the power is then provided by the batteries of Wentian itself, rather than by the system of the launch pad. So now I see that they're showing the expert panel. Umbilicals have been disconnected, says 41 South. Absolutely. So the connections to the fairing have been disconnected. The core stage, there are still some connections that are there. There's also data that's being offloaded to the control center at Wenchang to monitor the parameters of the rocket. So disconnection, clear disconnection at the top. There's still some connections at the bottom. See, I'll just answer some comments at the same time. And maybe can give me some ideas of what to do, what to go more in depth into. Time to Go says, for the first live stream, this is very well done. Audio is perfect, discussions engaging. Thank you, Time to Go. Very encouraging. Droz Wally says, 天气真好，现场的朋友真幸福. So Chinese person speaking here. And so he's saying the weather's great, and he's very jealous of the people who are on site watching the launch. Do you prefer Patreon or YouTube subscription? Hi, Vincent. So I don't have YouTube subscription yet. I mostly have Patreon. The main reason, because YouTube takes a 30% cut off what you do on, super thanks or subscriptions. So that's not activated. There's only super thanks at the moment. You don't have to support anything, but if you like to support, feel free to drop a super thanks on YouTube or Patreon. That would be very helpful for the channel. Again, feel free to ask your questions in the comment section. No need to donate if you don't have to. I'll try and answer all questions. Let me see if there are some other questions that I can answer. Good job. 600 people. That's crazy. 600 people on my very first live stream. That's pretty crazy. Polaved, thank you for your generous donation. Thank you so much. Really helps the channel. What else do we have here? Looking down at the questions. Can you introduce yourself? So we're really close to the launch. I'm going to do that really rapidly. Indeed asks for an introduction. So I'm Jean Deville. I'm the host of the YouTube channel. I've been doing this for roughly 2 years. I've I've always been interested in China. I speak Chinese. I've lived actually many years in Taipei, in Shenzhen, in Beijing. So that's where I picked up the language. And so I have also a strong interest in space. I studied aerospace engineering during my university years. And so when you combine those two, you get the Chinese space sector. And I think that Chinese space is just a good thing to create content about, because it's not that well covered right now on YouTube. And talking about U.S. space, that's just saturated on the moment on YouTube. You have great people like typically Everyday Astronaut that's doing that. And so I'm trying to bring something original to the space community, while focusing on my interests also, which are the Chinese world and the space industry. And I'm based in Paris at the moment. I've been in Paris now for a couple of years. I used to be in Shenzhen, and hope to return to China, notably for launches in Hainan. That would be absolutely great. And maybe we can also live stream some of the future launches of the commercial launch companies like Landspace, iSpace. That would be really fantastic. And so yeah, it'd be nice to be sort of the everyday astronaut of Chinese space. That'd be pretty cool. Let me see. Any other questions? How does the engine compare to Merlin or Raptor, says Lu Changlio? So it depends what engine we're talking about here. On the Long March 5B, you have two types of engines. You have the core stage, which has two YF77 engines. These are hydrolox engines, so they consume liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen. They are high thrust engines. It's China's first high thrust hydrogen engine, and so these were designed in the 2000s and early 2010s. And this was a very challenging task for China, because hydrogen is just a very sensitive material to manipulate. It's cold. It's liquid at very, very cold temperatures. And so it has very low density, so that's very tricky for the plumbing systems, the cryogenic plumbing systems. And the difference in density with other fuels and propellants means that you have to usually you need to have two separate turbopumps, so the turbo machinery is more complex. So that's the YF77. The Chinese, for their first hydrolox high thrust engine, they went for a more simple layout. So this is an open generator, a gas generator cycle, which is more simple. And you can see it here, actually. It's those engines at the bottom, and you can see some smoke coming out of it. And just to comment on that, by the way, what this smoke is it's called pre-cooling, I believe. And so what this is that they run some cryogenic propellant through the plumbing systems to make sure that they are cool. And the reason for that is, if you don't do that, basically at liftoff, you're then suddenly pumping ultra cold propellants at minus 200 degrees Celsius through the plumbing systems and the various pipes and tubes. And these are at ambient temperature at 34 degrees Celsius in Wenchang, apparently. And so the propellant would boil off immediately. And I believe there would be phenomenon like, cavitation, things like that. And so that's really not good for the engine. And so you waste just a tiny bit of the propellant to cool down the entire plumbing system, so that there's no thermal shock as you're igniting the engine, you're starting things up. Okay, so I was talking about the YF77. It's again, it's a more simple layout for their first engine, which means that they have a lower specific impulse compared to the the very high specific impulse of the the hydrolox engines that you have on the space shuttle and also on SLS. So SLS, naturally, the hydrolox engines on SLS are much more sophisticated. They're heavier, but they also have higher efficiency. And so the Chinese are also working on more modern hydrolox engines for their upcoming rockets, notably for the very famous Long March 9 that's supposed to see the day somewhere in the early 2030s. And so those will be more sophisticated engine cycles, I believe. So less efficient, more simple. That's not necessarily a bad thing for the Long March 5 rocket core stage. And then we have the engines of the side boosters, which are the YF100. These are Kerlox engines. And so it's a stage combustion cycle. So it's a more sophisticated cycle, which doesn't, dump the excess exhaust of the gas generator just out wasting potentially propellant. It reuses that in some way. And so it's a more sophisticated, higher efficiency engine. And I don't really have the detail on this engine just out of the top of my head, but you can check out Everyday Astronaut. He has a great video on the history of Soviet rocket engines. And there's a lot of parallels to be done because the Soviets did a lot of stage combustion engines, cycle engines with liquid kerosene and oxygen. And I believe that the YF-100 kilooxide engine is derived from the RD-120, which is, I believe, a second stage combustion engine that the Chinese acquired from the Russians. And so there's some similarities between those engines. And so if you check out Everyday Astronaut's video, I'm sure that you'll get a more detailed technical overview of that engine. So it's pretty much, I guess, the YF-100. That one is pretty much state of the art. Now, the question, I think, was comparing it to the Merlin Raptor. So Raptor, very different. It's it's a Methalox engine. Merlin is Keralox, but I think the Merlin engine is really geared for a reusability, can be restarted multiple times. That is not the case for the YF-100, I believe, or at least I'm not aware of the restarting capabilities. And just very naturally, it's because the Long March rockets today are not designed, unfortunately, to be reusable. And it's for the Long March 5B, for example, it does make sense to not make things reusable. The Long March 5 doesn't launch that much, actually, because it's, Long March 5 has the standard version. So with 2 stages, it's been launched probably 5 times at most. It's for geostationary satellites and deep space missions, but China doesn't launch that many of those, and geostationary satellites are still commonly launched by the Long March 3B, another older rocket. And so none of these rockets are reusable. The state-owned companies are looking at making some of these rockets reusable in the coming future. The Long March 8 is supposed to be derived into a reusable version. There's Long March 5DY, the future lunar rocket. Long March 9, these normally should be reusable, but we're talking about at least in a couple of years. So short-term, no reusable rockets for state-owned manufacturers, so the Long March series. However, the commercial companies are really extremely active in terms of and they're all aiming at making medium-lift, liquid-fueled, vertical takeoff, vertical landing rockets. And we're supposed to see a first, maiden launches of at least one such rocket in 2022. You have Landspace that's building the Long March. That's building the Juche 2 rocket. I actually had some visuals on that. I may show that later in the stream if you're interested. So do leave a comment if you're interested in hearing more about these companies. You have, maiden launch this year, you have Interstellar Glory or iSpace. They have their Hyperbola 2 that's supposed to perform vertical takeoff, vertical landing hops this year. And you also have a Galactic Energy. They're planning to launch in 2023, similar vertical takeoff, vertical landing rocket. Okay, I see that we're 1 minute, 40 seconds away from launch. So I'm going to put up the volume of the stream just real quick and look through the questions. And at about 30 or 20 seconds before the launch, I'll just stop talking and we can watch the launch together.
这是我们在发射0秒的时候，那么在发射这个180秒左右吧，就是3分钟。首先我们现在是分离，再过大概在20秒准备工作整个发工作都已经这样，我们仪表载荷会露出我们已经转上了建档的内电。二一个可以看到，我们在8分钟左右的时间，我们这个时候会和仪表载荷进行分离。那么1分钟发射过程的主要几个。
Why do I hear 2 voices? This is weird.
等会儿可以看到。这个氢氧发动机的这个点火，这是射前1分钟的允许点火口令。
There we go.
明白。50秒，50秒。
Okay, 50 seconds, guys. This is going to be exciting.
40秒，40秒。
Thank you, DHSU 2008, for your generous donation. I see it's from Hong Kong. Hi, Hong Kong. Great place.
30秒，30秒。
30 seconds. My God, things are happening, guys.
20秒，20秒。
10 seconds.
10、9、8、 7、6、
My God.
5、4、3、2、1，点火，点火。140，两两分，32秒，负500毫秒。
Yeah, baby.
两两分，32秒。
Things are going well. People on the beach are ecstatic. Excellent.
信号正常，程序转弯。
People are shouting on the beaches.
雷达跟踪正常，遥测信号正常，文昌飞行正常。
So, can you translate what they're saying, says Stefan? So right now it's
110跟踪正常。
it's the telemetry ground stations that are talking. They're saying blah 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 space station, you know, tracking is good, is correct.
317跟踪正常。文昌光学雷达跟踪正常，
So
遥测信号
Wenchang 光学雷达正常,
文昌
Wenchang optical radar, you know, tracking correct. So it's just tracking that we're seeing here. This is a very nice camera that's where you can see the
阵地
core,
112跟踪正常，
the core stage and the boosters.
阵地315跟踪正常。
Yeah, the gravity turn, yes indeed, where it's slowly, you know, it's not rising vertically anymore. It's trying to get some tangential velocity, because naturally, if you want to orbit the Earth, you need to have tangential velocity and not radial
文昌
velocity.
光学雷达跟踪正常，遥测信号正常，文昌飞行正常。
Good stuff. Good stuff, guys. Good stuff. So booster separation should happen around, I believe, 170 seconds. So we still have a good minute before that. And you can see that the rocket plume is growing bigger and bigger. And that's because the atmosphere pressure is dropping. And so naturally the plume tends to grow. And this is something that you see on all rockets. You can see that it's now there's a larger expansion rather than the very narrow one that there was at the launch.
可能主要也是助推器上的气。
对。
现在我们这个画面也是通过光学长焦拍到的。
对。
这个
41
是不是现在如果拿肉眼观看，应该是看不到的已经。
肉眼。
Chinese CGTN says Wyla.
流水
It's normal.
跟踪正常。
很长的这个尾烟。
文昌光学雷达跟踪正常，遥测信号正常，文昌飞行正常。
Still tracking stations on the ground that's talking.
现在还是文昌的遥测点来公布的正常的信息通报。
对。
目前助推器还在。
See, the plume is so huge now that you literally don't see where it ends.
跟踪正常。
现在已经是不同的测控点开始跟踪我们的火箭的飞行情况。对，西沙也报告正常。
可以看到中间这个。
助推器关机。 助推器分离
and booster separation.
助推器朝4个方向。
跟踪正常。
All 4 boosters are now separated. You only have the core stage, the Hydrolox engines that are firing normally.
遥测信号正常，文昌飞行正常。
这个时候是火箭1级还在继续。
And just a fun fact on the Hydrolox engine. So the Hydrolox engine is acting. The Long March 5B is a very interesting rocket because it's what they call 1 stage and a half. So N.5 is the boosters, and you only have 1 core stage, the first stage. There's no second stage, and so the first stage is also acting as a second stage. And so there are advantages and disadvantages to that. A clear advantage is, well, you know, you don't have stage separation, so it's more simple. You have fewer points of failure. Oh, sorry, fairing separation just happened. There's no more atmosphere. You don't need a fairing to protect Wentian. And so it's discarded. It's returning back to the Earth. There's no atmosphere.
所以这个时候，问天实验舱已经是暴露在太空中了。
对。
流水3901跟踪正常。
So still tracking, talking. Let me just wrap up on the Long March 5B. And so what happens is the first stage has to act as a second stage. It has to bring the payload to orbital velocity. And that's also a big challenge because normally second stages have smaller thrust engines. And here you have 2 YF-77 high thrust engines that are acting as second stage engines. And so that was seeing interviews from CALT, the Chinese manufacturer of rockets, this was definitely a challenge for them to have high thrust rockets act as second stage engines and to do the precise orbital insertion with such big engines. And so that's one thing. There's another disadvantage, obviously, with having a first stage be a second stage, is that the first stage then stays in orbit for quite a while, and it decays at some point, so you can't really predict where it will land. And this was sort of an issue with the first two Long March 5B launches, where there was a sort of a international diplomatic sort of incident on the fact that it did uncontrolled reentry. So it'll be interesting to see if they fix that with this launch, because China has been known to make incremental improvements over its, for same rockets, but over different launches. So it'll be interesting to watch if that's done. I don't know if they'll talk about it, putting back on the launch and also checking out your questions at the same time.
西沙424跟踪正常。
现在火箭的一级推进器还在继续工作，稍后是要进行分离。
对，稍后就是一级发动机关机和舱舰分离，就这两个动作。
文昌。
从刚才的画面看，策划大厅里面
文昌雷达跟踪正常，遥测信号正常，文昌飞行正常。
It's still tracking. It's talking. For those who are just joining, a quick recap. What's going on is China is launching the Wentian experimental module. So one of the 3 parts of China's space station that's supposed to be fully assembled at the end of this year. The Tianhe core module, so the command center, is already in orbit. It's been launched last year in April, and so this is the second module. And right now what's going to happen with Wentian is that once it separates from the first stage, it will then dock with the Tianhe core module. And so this should take place over the next couple of hours, probably between 6 to 10 hours. And so that'll be a significant milestone in the assembly of China's space station. Wentian, as mentioned, it's an experimental module. It's it's destined for space sciences. So as mentioned earlier in the stream, there are a lot of experimental racks in space sciences, thingies, arms, attachment points that are in there.
第一个呢，就是咱们这次刚才主播说了，咱们这次的太阳能帆板非常大，非常大，要把这么大的帆板装在这个整治罩里边，所以它必须得采用一些新技术。所以这次用的是这个柔性的太阳电池翼。这个柔性的太阳电池翼就不像刚性太阳电池翼那样。
So he's talking about the solar panels, how they're big, and the special technology. I already covered that, so I'm going to put him on mute for a while and answer some questions. Strategy Analysis Center says, John, at what point can we say that launch was successful and has placed Wentian in the right trajectory? And so basically, the Chinese consider the launch successful, and that you have the usual red banner that's displayed when 2 things happen. So first of all, when the solar arrays are deployed, and so when separation naturally has taken place, when solar arrays are deployed, and when the antenna, which is folded up at the moment, is also deployed. At that point, everyone claps in the control center. That's the launch success. If I remember correctly, for the launch of Tianhe, the Long March 5B first stage inserted Tianhe not in exactly the correct orbit. Apogee was 400 kilometers and perigee was around stage separation, guys. People are clapping. Just 2 more steps before success of the launch. You can see the rear docking port of Wentian. And just to wrap up, normally they're not inserted in the exact orbit, and so there are probably some orbital maneuvers to get to the Chinese space station Tianhe core module's orbit, which is roughly 400 kilometers, a circular orbit of 400 kilometers. And there you have it. You can see that the solar arrays here are not deployed yet, and the antenna is still folded up. It's pointing upwards. And you can also see all the features that I described earlier in the stream. And this is actually what you're seeing here. It's naturally a simulation, but it shows what it shows is coming from telemetry data. And so when the solar arrays deploy, then signal is downlinked, and then it's connected to the control center, which will then make the solar arrays deploy on this on this simulation here. So it's very realistic. So it's very cool. We don't have camera views, I believe, but we have this simulation, which is not as good, but almost as good. Okay, let's listen in.
所以我们刚才也提到了，实验舱它是自带动力，它要继续进行自身的一个调整。
就最后一般火箭都是打在一个椭圆轨道上。
Yeah, exactly what he's saying, 椭圆轨道. So it's first sent into an elliptical orbit that's not the orbit of the Tianhe core module, and then it's moved to Tianhe's orbit.
进入到原先预定的设计轨道，一般都是个圆轨道就可以。这次的实验舱，因为它要交互对接，所以它准备好以后，它还要控制轨道，要进入到核心舱飞行的那个轨道，所以这个要求就更高。
发射任务 结束之后呢，接下来我们问天实验舱它的一个重要的目的就是要去不断的追赶核心舱。是。
Yes. So cool question that's coming from Jamie, Steam, I think, Jean Deville. Are the taikonauts actual scientists or highly trained in experiments they'll be doing? That's an excellent question. And so there are 3 batches of Chinese astronauts, right? There's batch 1, batch 2, batch 1, batch 2, and all of the astronauts today are part of batch 1, batch 2. Batch 1 was recruited in the 90s for phase 1 of the crewed spaceflight program. All of them Air Force pilots. And then we have batch 2 that was recruited in the late 2000s, I believe. And so these guys are Air Force pilots as well. And you have fighter jets. You have also military transportation aircraft. And Liu Yang, for example, who's part of the Shenzhou 14 crew, I believe she's Air Force pilot for military transport aircraft. And so science is probably not their core, core training, but they're highly trained in doing the space experiments and everything that they're going to do. There are simulation, facilities. There's sort of a huge pool, similar to what NASA does, basically, where you can do these things and simulate them and train astronauts before they go on board. Now, interesting point is that batch 3 of astronauts, which were recruited just a couple of years ago, and we don't know the identity of those astronauts yet, China has decided to expand the scope of these astronauts. So these guys have already been selected. We know that there are naturally Air Force pilots, but there are also, people from other scientific areas that are linked to aerospace. And then there are just scientists as well, in smaller numbers, but there are scientists as well that are not linked to aerospace at all. And these guys will occupy the role. They'll be astronauts, they'll be payload specialists. And so I would imagine that within batch 3, there could be biologists for life and biology experiments, and there could be people that are, focused on microgravity experiments. There could be a lot of things, different types of trainings in batch 3. So, short answer, all Air Force pilots at the moment, but batch 3, which has already been selected, but we don't know who these astronauts are. Those guys, there's a bit more diversity in there.
建造任务以外呢，我国后续的一些低轨的走往星座的发射任务
Hi from Ethiopia. Hi. Lee Amelia says hi.
它的功能应该是可以一次多发几颗卫星。
对。这个因为长虹 B 火箭它有一个典型的特征，一个就是能力大，第二个就是整流罩大。整流罩现在长度是20.5米，直径是5.2米。我们简单这个给科普一下，就是我们整流罩的整个空间大概是在380立方米左右。可以类比一下，就是可以大概能装多少人呢？装500到600个成年人。然后能是这么一个规模，所以说它以后在我们国家的低轨发射任务中是占据非常重要的地位。
对，有了这个大的空间，就可以运送更多的东西、货物、卫星甚至是实验舱上天哈。
对。
刚才其实咱们共同经历的这8分钟的发射过程，我的心里还是挺紧张的。我估计可能很多观众朋友跟我们一样。但刘主任，您天天和火箭打交道啊，就是专门设计火箭的，看这个发射的时候
，Thank you DZ for your compliment。
还一样吗？还有那么多激动的情绪吗？
一样的，我也很激动，也很
Thank you, Gui Wenluo,
因为我们每
for
次
compliments.
发射这个火箭发射都是一个如履薄冰的一次。
So the question, when is it going to dock? I don't really know, but I think it's supposed to follow a fast docking procedure, and this was for Shenzhou and Tianzhou for the previous 2 launches. This is now between 6 and 10 hours. So presumably this would be the same thing for Wentian, but it's a different kind of spacecraft, so we don't know for sure. You know, let's find out. They'll probably talk about it. So tuning in again. Eric Leo, 6.5 hours. Thank you. So very similar to Shenzhou.
其实大家要知道背后凝结了多少的工作，凝结了多少人的这个要反反复复的去测试，去确认一切的运行正常，才能够保证我们最后
文昌发射场区指挥部
的成功。
邓红琴指挥长宣布发射任务结果。
This is the control center. Once they deploy the antenna and the solar arrays, I'll also show you an animation of what the docking procedure will look like. So stay tuned.
根据长征5号 B-13运载火箭飞行数据和北京航天器飞行控制中心监视计算，空间站问天实验场已准确进入预定轨道。根据飞行任务评判准则，我宣布此次发射取得圆满成功。
Congrats! There you have the red screen. I thought they were supposed to deploy the antennas and the solar arrays before they do this. Basically, what they just said is that
我代表发射场区任务指挥部，对参加这次任务的所有单位和全体参演参试人员表示热烈祝贺，对莅临指导的各位领导和专家表示衷心感谢。任务发射阶段工作到此结束，谢谢大家。
Okay, so they announced the success of the launch. So basically what they said is that Wentian is inserted in the correct orbit. So it's not the final orbit, probably. It's the sort of elliptical intermediate orbit. And then now Wentian has to raise its orbit, its perigee, until it reaches probably the circular orbit in which Tianhe is situated. And so you can see people... You know, they're lining up to get congratulated and shake hands with probably the leaders that are here to watch. And so you can see Liu He in the back. So these are very high ranking political, political establishment that have come to Wenchang to watch. There is political people. There is also military. You can see military in the back. And so, you know, shake hands, congratulations. Let me see if there are any more questions. Reyes says, when are the solar panels supposed to be expanded? I would expect pretty soon. I think that's one of the first things that are done after the launch, the antenna and the solar arrays. The main reason is right now everything is battery powered. You don't want to have everything that's battery powered. You want to deploy the solar arrays, and I think that's also part of the orbital sort of the parameters that you choose when you choose a launch window. It's to make sure that the spacecraft is in sunlight during the launch so it can deploy its solar arrays and harvest sunlight and solar power. And so I would say very soon. I believe that it won't deploy the entire solar arrays at the beginning. It'll just deploy a little bit, like maybe less than 10 meters. And then after that, it will... just enough to harvest some power, and the full extension of the solar arrays will only happen once it's docked with the space station.
要对这任务等待咱们后续的这个梦天实验场的到来。
刘主任看完了刚才整个发射的过程，觉得这一次的发射，您给打多少分
？100分
，100分，完全跟预期的一样哈。对。之前有担心过哪些环节可能会有一些，比如说出现偏差啊，或者一些突发的情况吗？
Jingbo Yuan says this is Beijing centric. Yes, this is BACC, the Beijing. I mean, the control is managed now by BACC, I believe, Beijing Aerospace Control Center. American says, won't it dock first? I wouldn't open them before docking. No, it's a general practice to, to expand the solar arrays before docking. This is what Shenzhou, Tianhe do. It's not an issue normally.
现在问天实验舱已经是在太空中正在追赶我们天河核心舱的这样一个过程之中哈。我们现场呢也有一个虚拟，大家现在看到的是。
Yes, Eric Leo says the solar panels will be deployed in 2 phases. Yes, indeed. First, a little bit before docking, and after docking, it'll deploy completely.
调向的一个过程，张总。
是这样，就是入轨以后，就其实第一个动作就是所谓叫消除初始偏差。 包括
消除偏，
对，消除初始偏差的，包括这个 飞行姿态的偏差和飞行角速度和姿态角的偏差，所以这块可能要花一定的时间，然后最后把它要调整到将来交会对接的这个飞行姿态，一般是3轴对地。
所以它的对接姿态应该是，它的大头
应该是
冲着我们的核心舱，这样来进行一个对接。
是它的现在咱说是出的这边是工作舱这一边，在飞行在前边，朝向我们这个天河核心舱。对，朝向我们天河核心舱，应该从这个方向来。对，这个就更明显一点，就是它是应该是以这个方向来飞行。这时候这个飞船已经没有这个飞船了，这个入轨的时候，运载火箭发射的时候是大头朝下的，这么发射。
对，刚才我们看发射的时候是小头朝上的。
对，小头。刚才问说整流罩这里边帆门没有展开，它就刚好是在整流罩里边。入轨以后呢，它就要从这个姿态，从这个姿态就要调整到这个姿态。
这个姿态是在什么时候开始调整？现在正在调整吗？
应该是正在调整。这时候它要保证它。因为交会对接，大家看到包括
Yeah, so they're saying that when it was launching, the pointy end was at the top, and for docking, it's it's the large cylindrical module, that docking port that will dock first, and so there's going to be attitude control maneuvers to make sure that it's that part that's they need to sort of turn the spacecraft around.
今天在14点22分的时候，搭载着中国空间站问天实验舱的长征5号 B 遥3运载火箭在文昌航天发射场点火升空，并且圆满完成了发射的任务。那接下来呢，我们要来连线我们前方的记者刘杰。刘杰呢，现在正在文昌航天发射场的侧发大厅。
So they're moving on to a journalist that's on
我相信
site.
现在大厅里面的气氛应该是非常的热烈，我们已经感受到了，通过声音啊，已经听到大家这种喜悦的心情。来，赶紧给我们带来最前方的观察。
好的，发射任务取得圆满成功之后啊，当侧发大厅里又见大红屏的那一刻，现场掌声响起。在场的航天人，他们欢呼，他们相拥，他们彼此祝贺。我也被现场的这种气氛深深感染了。接下来，我们就请出航天人来跟我们分享喜悦。
So what they're doing now is basically it's resting time for this. This is probably Wenchang launch control site. It's selfie time in front of that red banner. They can relax for now. Things are now controlled, I think, by Beijing or Xi'an.
今天长虹 B 火箭遥3发射圆满成功，把我们的问天实验舱准确地送入了轨道。这应该是一个历史性的时刻。
This is the chief designer of the Long March 5B.
今天成功发射了中国航天史上重量最重、长度最长，也可以说是重要性最为重要的一个空间飞行器，任务完成得很好，非常令人振奋和开心。
那我们这是首次
saying things were a success, everything's normal.
大推力的火箭，也是我们首次把超过23吨重的载荷送入太空。今天火箭的表现怎么样？
我觉得火箭的表现非常的完美。我们为了这个火箭准备了1年多的时间，做了40多项技术改进，特别为了零窗口做了大量的预案和讨论，反复的演练。今天所有的预案都没有用上，一切都在它应该发生的时候准确的完成。最后的点火时间的偏差，人手动摁的按钮差。
So, saying some interesting things, the Long March 5B is the first time that it's launching such a big payload. Wentian is actually slightly bigger than Tianhe, 17.9 meters versus 16 something for Tianhe. More than 23 tons. First time that Long March 5B is launching such a heavy payload. And they made modifications, up to 40 modifications, I think, to various tweaks to make things work out.
最多也就是20多天之后就要再次出发，来到文昌发射场。 执行梦天舱的发射，梦天舱发射成功之后呢，中国空间站3个主要舱段就全部发射完成，在天上呢组成一个 T 字形的中国空间站。那个时候我们再来一起为中国的空间站喝彩。
好的，谢谢。
All right.
好。 中国航天总是能带给我们太多的。
So just saying that, yeah, awaiting the T-shaped full Chinese space station at the end of the year.
问天实验舱的任务才刚刚开始，接下来我们就请到了问天实验舱的总指挥潘平。潘总您好。
你好。
那接下来问天实验舱还要与天河核心舱在太空中交会对接。
Did I just see Liu He? Yes.
什么样的状态？他在为交会对接都做着哪些准备
For Tianhe, there was Li Keqiang, the premier, actually.
祝贺火箭发射圆满成功。 我们呢也成功的迈出了一步。后续呢，我们要关注在轨的数据的判读。
This guy is the chief commander of Wentian.
那我们知道这次的交会对接用时要长达13个小时，比我们以往的这种交会对接的任务都要长很多。这是为什么
？13 hours to docking.
因为我们的是目前是最大、体积最大、重量最重一个飞行器，主动交会对接飞行器，所以说它的用时就要长些。
好的，那在交会对接之后，我们的问天舱还要接受哪些考验？
交接完成以后呢，我们就建了一个散热环境，我们的航天员就可以住到他的新家了。好
的，谢谢向您表示祝贺。我们也感谢他们的一丝不苟和精益求精。航天发射没有一条路是坦途，每往前迈一步都不容易。但是每一位航天人都有战胜困难的勇气和决心。我们也相信未来航天人能够带我们见证更多的航天奇迹。好的，让我们一同期待着13个小时之后，问天实验舱。
Okay, nothing special in what she's saying here. Viewer that says Jean, you should go back to China and conduct interviews with related people. I'd love to do that. Borders reopen and commercial companies can invite me on their sites, similar to what Tim Dodd is doing. That would be fantastic.
4:22分，搭载问天实验舱的长征5号 B 遥3运载火箭，在我国文昌航天发射场准时点火发射。约495秒之后，问天实验舱与火箭成功分离，并进入预定轨道，发射取得圆满成功。 这是我国载人航天工程立项实施以来的第24。
Yep, this journalist just recapping what's going on. So the launch of Wentian experimental module. This is a second module of the Chinese space station. There are 3 modules in total. The final module will be launched in October. It's the Wentian experimental module. In the end, it will form a T-shaped structure for the Chinese space station. It looks just like this. If I hide Google Maps and then I'll put back the stream, it looks just like this. This is what it'll look like at the end of the year. And Wentian's been inserted in the correct orbital, in the correct orbit. Now it has to correct it to join Tianhe. The docking time is about 13 hours from what we just heard from the chief designer of the Long March 5B.
和中国空间技术研究院抓总研制。那接下来呢，我们一起来回顾一下刚才。
Yes, 13 hours. I confirm time to go. It's I heard 13 hours as well. Okay, they're showing some images of the launch. And you can see what I described from a satellite viewpoint just now. You have the lightning protection towers. You have the 2 launch sites, pads. You have one for the Long March 5 and one for Long March 7 and 8. This is the one for the Long March 5 that you can see here. This is at liftoff. Ignition normally I would seem to happen. You see that there's some sparks that they shoot off before the launch to burn up any excess hydrogen, I think, that's coming out of the engines before ignition. We should see it soon. Yeah, you see the sparks that are there. That's what it's for. And then there's the water deluge system at the bottom, which is a sound suppression system to suppress all the very high, extremely high acoustic environment, and there are acoustic waves that probably reach 150, 160, 170 decibels, and they can be reflected and hit the rocket. And so it's to avoid that kind of thing. And that's why I actually have those huge clouds of smoke during launch, because that's actually the water of the water deluge system that's vaporizing. XR2D2X says, au revoir, je vais dormir maintenant. Bonne nuit. Yeah, it's definitely very early in France. I also didn't sleep that much. I have my coffee with me here. And so, yeah, have a good night for those who are in France. I'll probably have a nap later today as well.
阵地112跟踪正常，阵地315跟踪正常。文昌光学雷达跟踪正常，遥测信号正常，文昌飞行正常。
Chun-Li says, nice mug. Yes, this is Endeavour. Got that from the museum in LA with actually some colleagues brought it back for me. And this is the space shuttle. Patrick says, Patrick Joe says, can we donate on PayPal or Venmo to your channel? Unfortunately, I don't have any of those two. You can only do super thanks on YouTube. There's also buymeacoffee.com/Dongfang Hour. That's another possibility for one-time donations. And otherwise, there's Patreon for if you want to become a regular. Of course, you don't have to donate anything, but if you do, it's really helpful to help this channel grow. Cinéma en France, absolutely. You should be candidate in Tiangong, says Tang Dynasty. Says Kent Chen. I don't think there's something that's supposed to be launched in 23 days, unless I'm wrong. Right now, we have the experimental module that's in orbit. Wentian dock. The Shenzhou 14 crew have a lot to do already. You have the Tianhe 4 cargo spacecraft that was launched not that long ago. And so I think it will stay like this for quite a while. Next step is Mengtian that will be launched in October. Then you'll have Tianzhou 5, and you also have the launch of Shenzhou 15, but that's really more at the end of the year. So things should be pretty quiet for the Chinese space station in terms of launches until, until October. And so next live stream is probably in October for Mengtian.
各位领导、专家、同志们，根据长征5号 B 遥3运载火箭飞行。
Will I be doing a live stream for docking? I don't know. I don't know if the launching window is predictable. I don't know how much of that they'll be streaming on CCTV, so it's hard to predict. Maybe, I don't know. If that's something you're interested in, I can consider it. American says you really deserve 10 times the subscribers. Thank you so much. Okay, here we have a nice animation of the Long March 5. I guess this is because they're going to pause the restream, in which case I can talk a little bit about the commercial launch vehicles if you're interested in that. What are they going to do? Okay, this is some restream of footage from Tianhe. You can see the flexible solar arrays, beautiful images of the Earth. This is the current crew that's on board the Chinese space station, Shenzhou 14. Launch of Mengtian should be in August, not October. I have October in mind, Jimliu, but people correct me in the chat if I'm wrong. Should be October.
3次的撤离，2次的转位实验，还有机械臂的实验等等等等。
问天和梦天还有很多的科学实验机柜，需要我们在上面做大量的空间科学实验。
Chendong, astronaut Shenzhou 14. He's talking basically about the experimental racks on Wentian. He was actually, this is his repeat flight. He already flew on previous Shenzhou missions. This is Cai Shuzhe. He is the only new astronaut, actually. This is his first flight. For Liu Yong and Chendong, it's the second flight.
他都会去举行这样的开展大量的科普活动。
这里是中国空间站系列直播特别节目。今天14时22分，搭载问天实验舱的长征5号 B 遥3运载火箭，在我国文昌航天发射场准时点火发射。 大约495秒之后，问天实验舱与火箭成功分离，并且进入预定轨道。
Jeff, when will Juche 2 launch? Whenever there's a downtime, I'll talk about the commercial launch vehicles really soon. Want to see what they want to talk about now.
我们演播室呢又请来了一位嘉宾，航天科技集团5院空间站系统副总设计师朱王晨，欢迎朱总。要特别说一下哈，朱总所在的这个航天科技集团5院呢，它是问天实验舱的设计单位。 那么将会和我们中国载人航天工程副总设计师张总一起再继续和观众朋友们关注问天实验舱的发射任务。朱总，您看啊，现在这个距离建舱分离已经有10几分钟的时间了哈。那现在我们问天实验舱是处于一个什么样的状态？
目前应该是中继通信天线已经展开了，现在应该是正在太阳电池展开的一个过程中，应该是这个状态。
刚才我们还说到说，问天实验舱是需要做一个投资。 因为我们发射的时候是小头送上，但是对接的时候呢是大头要和我们核心舱对接，现在转过来了吗？
在消除片的时候就已经把。
Thank you, Tiparanga, for the nice words.
5分钟左右吧，应该已经完成了。
所以这一次入轨的话，这个轨道应该也是入的比较精确的。
对，这个发射时刻很准确。
我们继续来聊一下大家也非常关注的
All parameters are
问天实验舱上的太阳翼，因为这一次太阳翼的设计非常的特别。往常的航天器呢，在发射完之后啊，太阳翼帆板会立刻全部展开，这也是一个我们发射任务结束的一个节点性的标志。但是这一次呢，并没有以它为节点，是太阳翼将会缓慢的展开。为什么会做这样的一个设计？
因为这个是这个柔性太阳电池翼嘛，它的这个展开过程比这个常规的太阳电池翼要复杂，整个这个时间呢也比较长。它整个就是这是半展开吧，就第一次展开，大概要20几分钟的时间，这个等待时间比较长，所以就是在火箭把核心舱把这个问天实验舱送入轨道以后，就发射就可以宣布成功
了。我们可能光说啊，大家这个感觉还不是特别的清晰。我们也专门制作一段虚拟，我们来结合虚拟，共同给大家展示一下。
So he's talking about the solar arrays. Why does it take that much time to deploy them? It's because it's a new type of technology of solar panels. They're flexible, and so they have to do in 2 steps.
问天实验舱正在一个飞行的状态哈，当它要和核心舱进行对接的时候。
You see, the solar arrays were partially open.
展开的情况是什么样的？应该还没有完全展开。
对接的时候还是依次展开的状态，它在对接完成锁定之后，再完全展开，2次展开。
So when it's docked, you see it's only partially deployed on the left.
一半吧，这个一展大概只有
Once it's docked, then it will deploy completely, as you can see here.
完全展开有50多米。
展开有50多米。Once it's fully expanded, 50 plus meters. I saw 55 meters on internet
太阳翼帆板以外，加上中间的这个
55米
舱的这个
是从这个太阳翼就是左右两侧的太阳翼，从这个太阳翼的端面到另外一侧太阳翼的端面，2个端点之间的距离一共是50多米。对。
哎呦，那是真的是非常的长了哈。为什么要设计这么大的太阳翼
？Why do we need to be this big?
因为是这样，这个是由整个空间站的整个的这个3舱梯次构型来决定的。这个太阳电池翼呢是空间站的一个关键部件。作为核心舱来说呢，因为它是整个空间站的一个核心，前面它有节点舱，后面有这个后端通道，所以它的那个太阳电池翼不能放在这个舱的2端，只能放在舱的中间。这样的话，在形成这个
3舱梯次构
成组合体之后，
otherwise they would probably bump into Wentian and Wentian solar arrays.
So they're
very small, and that's why you need bigger ones for the experimental modules.
是没法发挥它最大的效率的。但是你放在实验舱上面，在实验舱的尾部，它就是能够远离这个舱体，没有。
At the end of the experimental modules, you're far from the core stage, and so you can really make the solar arrays as big as possible to harvest as much solar power as possible.
所以我们看到实验舱上的这个太阳能帆板呢，它的面积其实要比核心舱的要大很多。
对。
那另外这么大的这样一个太阳能帆板，它的发电能力到底有多强？
双翼应该是十几千瓦吧，不低于13.5千瓦。
这是一个什么概念？
就是核心舱的发电能力是8000瓦。
所以它要比核心舱的能力确实要高
出很多。8000 watts，
而且这是仅仅是一个实验舱的太阳电池翼，另外一个实验舱还有一副这样的太阳电池翼。
等到梦天实验舱再把这2个大翼展开之后，那我们这个电力是可以说非常充足的。
中国空间站的这个太阳电池翼的构型是非常有特色的。既不跟俄罗斯是组合式空间站，它每一个舱段上都有自己一套。
So he's talking about why they chose this sort of layout for the solar arrays. I believe they said 13000 or 18000, so 13,000 or 18,000 watts for the solar arrays of Wentian. I didn't catch that. I was talking at the same time. Let me know if you caught that.
建造起来比较复杂。咱们国家这个构型非常巧妙，2个实验舱就像这个对接完以后，这2个太阳电池翼可以360度。绕轨道一圈的时候，它可以跟踪太阳。另外，比以前的帆板还有一个好处特点在哪儿呢？它是双轴控制的，它就这个方向也可以转。
So what he's saying is really interesting. Is that what he's saying is that the solar arrays of Wentian and Mengtian, they can spin around their main axis, but they can also spin in a perpendicular direction. There are 2 degrees of liberty, and this enables really to follow perfectly the solar solar radiation that's incoming for maximum efficiency.
刚才呢，问天实验舱它的发射阶段任务已经取得了圆满成功，已经进入了预定的轨道。那其实对于问天实验舱而言，它的旅程才刚刚开始，刚刚脱离了地球表面。接下来呢，它有一个主要的任务，就是要不断的去追逐核心舱，然后并且从核心舱的 相当于是核心舱的前向对接口来进行一个对接。那我们将会一直为大家来关注每一步的一个重要的节点。航天器上的这个太阳翼，就是我们刚才说到的这个实验舱上太阳翼啊，它们也被称作是太阳帆板。问天实验舱上的太阳帆板呢，是比核心舱上的还要大得多，发电能力更强，每天的发电量足够一个普通家庭用上1个多月。我们不妨来详细的了解一下问天实验舱它的一个太阳能帆板的功能。
Okay, there's going to be a short video, I think, on the solar arrays.
问天实验舱上携带的2个太阳能电池帆板，是我国有史以来在航天器上装备的最大的太阳帆板，采用了与核心舱太阳帆板同样的柔性材料，但是面积要比核心舱的大得多。问天实验舱上每个太阳帆板展开面积约110平方米。差不多相当于一套31厅房子的面积。
110 square meters.
跟核心舱形成这个组合体以后，单翼长度会达到23米，2个翼加起来，再加上中间舱体的话，基本上会达到55米这样一个水平。
2个硕大的太阳帆板一起工作，可以有效收集更多的太阳能，每天平均发电量超过430度，为空间站运行提供充足的能源。放在地面上，日发电量足够一个普通家庭用上1个多月。
核心舱的话，我们设计指标的话，大概在8000瓦啊，然后实验舱1的话，能达到14000瓦。功率越大的话
，14,000 watts for Wentian solar arrays.
刚刚发射成功的问天实验舱，作为我国空间站的首个实验舱，结构复杂，功能强大，可以说是一位全能。
That was images of the Tianhe core module. It hasn't docked yet.
全能又体现在哪些方面呢？
问天实验舱舱体总长17.9米，直径4.2米，重量达23吨。这块头和分量是全世界现役在轨最重的单舱航天器。
现在呢，我们看到的就是
核心舱发生故障的话，问天实验舱可以把它接手过来，然后维持整站的一个。
空间站建成后要长期在轨运行，在这个过程中一旦出现故障，为了保证航天员的安全，可以在问天实验舱中进行暂时性的避险。
问天实验舱是由工作舱、气闸舱以及资源舱。
Okay, so translating what he said, I think one of the most important points here to mention is that there is full redundancy that's provided inside Wentian compared to Tianhe. And so, you have full attitude control systems. You have the reaction control thrusters. Wentian has them too. So if anything goes wrong on Tianhe, there's a backup on Wentian. Same thing for the control moment gyros, those spherical balls that are actually situated inside Wentian and not at the outside like it's the case for Tianhe. It's the same thing for the relay antenna. So there's a really what they're called, 1-by-1 full redundancy between Wentian and Tianhe. And I mean, that's even the case for the resting areas, the sleeping quarters. So it's Wentian is really somewhat between, I think, a Tianhe command center and a full space sciences module. It sort of covers both.
生活需求，工作舱不仅拓展了生活空间，后续航天员还将在这里开展一系列科学实验。
我们工作舱呢，应该是个30立方米左右，还配备了这个8个实验机柜，跟核心舱相比呢，是相当于翻了1倍，能够支持。
Yeah, so 8 experimental racks on Wentian. There are only 4, I believe, that are occupied. It's the ones that I described. There are 4 remaining spaces for future upgrades. But yeah, 8 racks default space for Wentian and Mengtian.
新的睡眠区等等。所以朱总先请教您一下，就是我们3位航天员他的睡眠区是在问天实验舱的哪个位置？
Talking about the sleeping quarters now.
问天实验舱就是靠近气闸舱的这个位置，在它的这个工作舱大概就是。
What he's pointing at is the sleeping quarters in Wentian. So on the left, it's the working compartment. Hope they show it. It's on the right of the blue module.
不太一样。核心舱的这个3个睡眠区是分布在，就是如果是咱们面朝飞行方向的话，核心舱睡眠区是在飞行方向的2侧啊。这个问天实验舱的3个睡眠区呢，有2个是在这个。 飞行方向2侧，还有一个是在朝天的那个方向，
也就是竖着的。
对，它是绕着这个轴线 这么圆周方向3个这么分布的。
所以大家也别觉得奇怪哈，因为其实，在太空中我们也没有什么上天下地的这个一个概念，所以其实怎么摆着都能睡，无论是横着睡、竖着睡，总之都是飘着睡。
Funny thing, they're talking about the fact that you can sleep in any direction in a space station because you're in microgravity, so you can sleep vertically or horizontally, and so the sleeping quarters are probably in a circular, distributed in a circular way, and it doesn't matter because there's no gravity or you're in microgravity, and so you can sleep vertically. It's not an issue.
神14的航天乘组，他们能不能，我就说我进到我们的问天实验舱里去，今天晚上到那儿去睡，可以自主去选择吗？
这个航天员进入问天实验舱以后，问天实验舱的3个睡眠区呢，原本就是设计为就是正常使用的睡眠区。将来这个核心舱的3个睡眠区就把它作为乘组轮换期间用的一个睡眠区。再有就是还可以临时存储一些物资，把它当成一个存储的空间。
实际上就是他们要会搬到这个实验。
The sleeping quarters are full-fledged sleeping quarters. Astronauts can naturally rest, sleep in them. Since there aren't 6 taikonauts that are simultaneously on the Chinese space station, they can also use it as storage space if they're not occupied. I think the only difference is they're close to the control moment gyro, so it might be a bit noisier, but apart from that, it's really the same thing as the Tianhe core module.
咱们的航天员，因为只有他们是在天上真正的去住这个睡眠区的。
对，而且刚才其实我们短片也说到了，像问天实验舱它有
Americans says good night from LA. Good night. Good night. Thanks for tuning in the live stream.
实验的功能，包括整体控制功能，还有生活功能的一个非常综合的一个舱。包括比如说我们具体一点，它能够和地面来进行实时通信，这个是可以做到的，是吧？
对，因为它也配置了这个中继通信天线，它是可以通过中继卫星和地面进行通信的，包括图像，包括话音。
那包括比如说对
Talking about the antenna now，
它也可以做到。
问天实验舱备份了空间站的控制系统，它可以接管空间站的控制权，包括姿态控制、轨道控制。
好，那生活方面，我能不能认为航天员也可以在我们的实验舱里，比如说做饭、对食物的加热，有饮用水，这些都有吗？
食品加热饮水在问天实验舱都有备份，
非常全面，
包括再生生保系统。在实验舱也是有一套备份的，
所以我可以理解它和核心舱真的是一个互为备份的关系。
So yeah, it's really backup for Tianhe. There's a backup, food processing system, hot water, and there's also the backup life support system, full life support system, basically on board.
我们知道核心舱的这个节点舱它已经是有出舱舱口了，而且我们之前的乘组们也都从那儿出舱去进行过工作。为什么在问天实验舱上还要再增加一个出舱的舱口呢？
核心舱呢是把这个节点舱兼做气闸舱，这个就是在核心舱单舱飞行的时候，把它当做一个气闸舱来使用。但是从这个功能定位上来说，节点舱呢是整个空间站的一个交通枢纽，它是连接着载人飞船2个实验舱，所以呢，这个舱在这个后边的实验舱的这个问天实验舱发射上去之后，它作为这个气闸舱的作用，就交给这个问天实验舱的专用气闸舱。那个是专门用于出舱活动的一个气闸舱，而且这个气闸舱呢，因为它的构型比这个节点舱还要大一点，所以它的出舱的舱门也比这个节点舱要大一点。
大家可以看到我们虚拟上黄色的区域，出舱口是冲下的，
对，
是吧？就是有几个这个像栏杆一样的圆形的。
这是航天员出舱时候攀扶的
扶手。为什么是冲下？我们冲下的概念就是说，实际上这个位置是朝向我们地球的这个方向。
对，
为什么要这么设计？不设计在顶上呢？
因为是这样，咱们实验舱的重要任务之一是支持这个空间科学实验。朝天的那个方向呢，是咱们这个暴露实验载荷需要的一个方向。而那个节点舱呢，为什么把它设计成朝上？朝下那个口是载人飞船径向对接的一个方向。
要给载人飞船留出一个口来。所以你看我们的这个黄色的部分，它上面是一个比较平的一个平台一样的一个方形的状态，所以在上面可以做一些暴露的实验。那么在下方呢，是我们航天员出舱。
Okay, let me cover what you just said. Basically, what you just said is that you can see that the hatch is facing downwards, facing the Earth on Wentian. However, on Tianhe, the core module, the multi-docking node, it's facing upwards. And the reason for that is for Tianhe, they didn't really have a choice because they needed a radial docking port pointing downwards. And so that was the only place left. I've seen on internet that the disadvantage is that when you're above, you're really facing the harsh sunlight, and that's not great for visibility. It's not great for pictures as well. Now, when you're facing downwards, you're normally masked from the sun, and so that's definitely an advantage, and that will definitely make for better pictures for the exposure of the cameras. So looking forward to the first EVA that Shenzhou 14 will be doing, probably from that area, from that airlock.
航天员他有很多空间站建造的任务，因为这个问天实验舱还有一些舱外的设备需要由航天员来进行安装，所以后续航天员还要通过这个专用的气炸舱进行几次出舱活动，完成
Several EVAs planned for Shenzhou 14 from Wentian.
据说后续要发的梦天实验舱上还有一个出舱口。
哦，那个是货物气炸舱。
Thank you, Monster Sound. Thanks for tuning in.
设备出舱的，人不从这出舱。
哦，设备对，专门有一个出舱的地方。
就是有一些这个舱外的作业不需要人参与，可以自动完成的。哦，这些这个作业对象可以由这个货物气炸舱来出舱。
哦，然后呢，需要跟我们的机械臂来进行后续的配合。
对。
啊，所以我们看到啊，真的神舟12号和神舟13号任务期间呢，我们航天员通过天河核心舱的节点舱已经是完成了4次的出舱任务了。那这
Thank you for your support, KH Lee and Zhou Xuemin. Thank you so much for your support, both coming from Hong Kong, I suppose. Thank you so much.
那问天的气闸舱将会成为今后航天员的一个专门的出舱口。我们通过一个短片再去了解一下。
问天实验舱的气闸舱外形十分独特，它是空间站系统唯一一个看上去是方形的舱体，而且这个独一无二的外形还是经过精心设计而成。
主要是考虑在外面要设置这个暴露实验平台，类似的这样一个平板结构的话，主要是为了方便机械臂到时候去抓取载荷安装在这个平台上。另一方面的话，等载荷的话都是有特定方向要求的。 它可以保证一个载荷。
Talking about the attachment points, those squares.
气闸舱外方内圆，里面圆柱形的是航天员出舱活动时的更衣间。在出舱气闸的壳上有一个直径达1米的大门，航天员从这里进进出出，不仅更加方便，而且还能够携带大个头的设备出舱工作，舱外工作能力大大提升。
那现在我们看到呢，就是问天实验舱的气闸舱。我们来看这个
airlock module. This is a close-up.
这个位置呢，就是今后航天员出舱活动的一个出口。那它的直径呢是1米，它比之前天河核心舱的气闸舱呢是要宽150毫米。这样呢，使得这个航天员出舱活动呢会变得
diameter of 1 meter. It's 15 centimeters larger than the other airlock hatch from Tianhe.
有12个立方米，它的里面的这个空间更加的大，而且它的这个舱门也更加大。 它的出舱呢，航天员更加的舒适。
The airlock chamber is also much larger, so it's better for the astronauts and not so cramped up with their spacesuits as they try to go out.
见证了实验舱问天实验舱它发射的圆满成功。现在呢，问天实验舱啊正处在一个追赶我们空间站组合体 天河核心舱的一个过程之中，那整个交会对接的过程可能是需要13个小时。那利用这样一个时间呢，我们也更具体的去了解一下问天实验舱上的很多的功能和器械，比如说它携带的这个小型的机械臂。这一次小型机械臂也是一个问天实验舱的亮点啊。我们知道核心舱上已经有一个
Talking about the small robotic arm now.
还需要在实验舱上再带一个小的机械臂上去呢？
这个小型机械臂呢，它的 作业精度比核心舱的大机械臂要更高，就在一些这个无人参与的这种自动化程度比较高的舱外的载荷作业，可以通过这个小机械臂来完成。
小机械臂它的精度高，那也就意味着什么样的一些任务更
Smaller robotic arm has a higher accuracy than the main robotic arm.
载荷从这个货物气闸舱抓取一个载荷。
Main reason is because it has to manipulate those experiments on the exposed attachment points.
所以小机械臂的功能可以说，大机械臂有的它全都有嘛。比如说在舱外独立进行行走。你看我们现在在虚拟的这个画面中就出现了。
You can see the robotic arm how it can move around from attachment point to attachment point.
大家应该留意过我们的节目的，能够看到过大机械臂在舱外独立行走的。所以小机械臂应该是也有这个功能的。
它可以爬行。自由度和大机械臂是一样的，就是这个运动范围比大臂要小。 这个承载能力比大臂要小，但是这个准确度 是更高一些的。功能都是一样的。
You can see it's moving from place to place.
在尝试着在舱外行走，它是把一个支点固定住以后，另外一个支点就可以抬起来。
So smaller robotic arm, it's smaller, higher precision, but otherwise it's really the same features as the main robotic arm.
和它绑定在一起，来进行一些位置的移动，一些任务的完成吗？
小机械臂可以支持航天员的舱外活动。
你看我们现在这个小机械臂是在问天实验舱。它的一个外部哈，实际上呢，它的这个灵活度确实。
What he just picked up is the interface to merge the two robotic arms. It's situated on the outside. It's just stored there, and whenever the two robotic arms need to merge, one of the robotic arms picks that up, and then you can see that the two robotic arms then can merge. This is what we're seeing now. Boom! Now it's a 15-meter long robotic arm.
我们看到大机械臂和小机械臂，它们两个进行了一个结合。这也是两个机械臂，共同发挥作用的一个非常关键的时刻哈。小机械臂相当于是停留在大机械臂的顶端，这样的话长度更长，这是一个组合体了。
这是大小臂级联的状态。
什么时候会用到这样一个级联的状态？
因为咱们整个空间站的构型尺寸比较大，就是在一些大范围的管理作业。是需要这个大小臂来这个连接状态来完成，因为咱们整个空间站舱体本身的长度就有将近40米，大臂本身呢长度最大只有10米，这样的话大小臂级联它的总长度能达到15米，基本上可以达到整个空间站的全部范围。
所以刚才我们看到整个这个动画的过程呢，是核心舱上的大机械臂慢慢的移动去寻找小机械臂。然后把小机械臂连在自己的顶端，这样的话就成了一个刚才您说到的大小机械臂的级联这样的一个状态。
And so why do they need a 15-meter long robotic arm? Why do they merge the two? Because some areas of the Chinese space station are only accessible when you merge the two, apparently.
更适合航天员亲自出舱作业。
需要航天员出舱作业的是一些更精细化的，就是需要一些主观判断、决策再进行操作的作业。像这种自动化程度比较高的作业。这是可以由机械臂来完成的，
而且机械臂是有7个自由度，这个自由度是什么概念？
就是它有7个方向可以转动
，7个方向可以转动，那也就是基本上是很灵活了。我能够想象到，比如说我的这个手臂，最基本的是4个方向，上下左右。
你所有的关节加起来也是7个自由度。
就是基本上和人的手臂是一样的。我们再通过一个短片来一起了解一下我们问天实验舱上携带这个小型的机械臂，它究竟有什么样的神秘之处
？Okay, probably a short clip on the robotic arm now.
小机械臂设置在问天实验舱的气闸舱外，这套小型的机械臂长度有5米，虽然身形小一些，但却与大机械臂一样，具备7自由度，可以说是小而巧的新装备。
它叫灵巧机械臂，它可以做一些非常精细的工作，用来抓取一些载荷，或者是
repeating what they said previously, it's higher accuracy for the small robotic arm.
小机械臂不仅可以单独作战，而且还能够与大机械臂联合形成一个15米长的组合臂，开展更多的舱外操作。后续在空间站建造完成之后，组合臂可以在3舱组合体之间爬行。舱外活动范围将进一步扩展，
应该说可以覆盖到我们整个的空间站的舱体的每一个角落，外表面得到了全覆盖。这样的话，比如说，我去舱体表面进行一个巡检，我都能看得到。
您正在收看的是中国空间。
So advantage of having a full robotic arm, not only it's a merged one, is that you can really see every single angle of the Chinese space station. Because again, remember both ends of the Chinese space station's robotic arms have cameras, and so if you want to see how things are going, maybe on the outer skin of part of the space station, then you can have the camera and the arm sort of point and go right in front of the area and point at it and see how things are going. So for maintenance purposes, basically.
入轨之后啊，有3组非常重要的解锁动作哈。那第一组动作呢，就是中继天线的解锁，然后第2组动作呢，就是太阳翼的解锁和依次展开。
As you mentioned, 2 big steps here: deployment of the antenna of Wentian and the solar arrays. The antenna normally has already been done.
10分钟以内，中继天线已经成功的展开了。 然后第二个大家非常关心的就是这个太阳翼的依次展开。那么就在几分钟之前，我们听到一个好消息，就是太阳翼的一次展开啊已经是结束了。其实从我们现在身后的大屏上，大家也可以看得到这个太阳翼依次展开以后的画面，只不过现在呢还是处在鹰照区，所以可能看得不是特别的清楚。那么太阳翼也可以说是问天舱的一大看点啊，它有一些什么样的特点？然后为什么是依次展开？然后它的展开又是一个分几步走，有一个什么样的过程呢？我这里也请来了。
Okay, so what she just said is actually that the first phase of the deployment of the solar arrays has been completed. It's just that maybe we don't see it on camera very well right now. You can see at the background that Wentian is still in the shadow. It's not in the sunlight, and it's going to enter a daylight zone soon. So solar arrays deployed, and relay antenna is now also deployed. So everything, everything is green lighted now. They just have to dock with the core module.
的交会对接会产生干扰，所以这时就决定咱们只展开一半，来保障后面的交会对接的顺利进行。
那我们也不妨来看一下大屏幕上的镜头，这个上面的这个镜头啊是一个动画，可以看得到现在问天舱的太阳翼已经依次展开完毕。那它现在的长度，单翼的长度应该是在6.5米左右哈，不到它全部展开的单翼长度的1/3啊，大家可以看。
It only deployed 5 point something meters, so only a third of its full length.
的单翼展开就可以达到20多米啊，所以可以说是非常长的。而且这对太阳翼呢，也是比天河核心舱的太阳翼啊要长得多。那它当时究竟是一个怎样的展开过程呢？您再给大家介绍一下。
咱们太阳翼展开过程一般分为5步。那么第一步就是解锁，就是通过火光屏把它跟那个太阳翼跟槽体的固定，就得把它解锁。第二个就是抬升，第二步就是抬升，通过抬升机构把太阳翼从槽体离开。那么第3步就是侧展，就相当于把那个咱们太阳翼，大家可以看到太阳翼一般一个单翼都分为2半，把它2半展开就是侧展。那么第4步就是相当于咱把它释放，就是相当于把它这个太阳翼从那个太阳翼里边有一个导向机构里边把它释放出来。最后一步就是慢慢的把它展开了，就是相当于展开成像咱们这个画面上这样一个状态了。
我这里也呢，用这个。
I did not fully get that. The guy had a very strong accent from some place in China. Sorry, guys.
怎么样？进行展开的。
这样的，咱们假如
demonstration.
开始这是我们初始的一个状态。然后
这个就是舱壁，然后资源舱的外壁，我们可以这么理解。然后这个就是太阳翼，太阳翼一开始呢是锁定在舱壁上的，然后它要展开之前，它还要先要完成一组动作，我们可以把它形象的用广播操来比喻一下哈。第一个动作就是热身运动，要解锁，然后第二个动作就是抬升。
对，就抬升。
这相当于是一个俯仰的运动。
Okay, they need to raise the solar panel, and then they open it like that, and only at that point.
就侧展。
第3步就是侧展哈，
就是把它2半就
can they expand it? And naturally, because the space station is inside a small fairing of the Long March 5B, and so you cannot. It really needs to be folded up to be within the 5-meter diameter fairing of the Long March 5B, and so that's why it has those moves before it can actually expand along the axis of the solar arrays.
又有一些什么样的区别？
这样，咱们问天舱上的太阳翼，面积要比太阳翼的面积要更大，可以说是基本咱们单翼的面积是天河核心舱的面积的2倍，基本是2倍这么个关系。而且另外还有个特点，更大的特点就是咱们太阳翼是相当于是个一个自由度的运动，咱们问天视野舱的太阳翼是双自由度运动，它既可以就是在一个水平方向运动，还可以在一个走向方向相当于一个滚动运动。这个的话，它可以
part origami. I like that. TW Lam.
适应于这个飞行姿态的一个变化，这个发电效率会更高。
也就是说，它可以像风车一样转。对，
是的。
那问天舱这样一种设计，它有一些什么样的好处呢？
是这样，就是第一个就是我们问天视野舱这样设计的话，因为咱们空间站形成组合体以后，3个舱包括以后的来访飞行器，它的遮挡就会比较厉害了。如果它只有一个自由度的话，它可能在某些角度下，其他舱体就会对它进行遮挡。
And so what he's saying here is that basically the difference between the solar arrays of the Wentian and Mengtian experimental modules compared to Tianhe, other than the fact that they're larger on the experimental modules, there's the fact that they have on the experimental modules 2 degrees of liberty, as mentioned just now. You know, they can pivot, and they can also pivot in another. They have 2 degrees of liberty. Tianhe's solar arrays only has 1.
看到太阳帆板它的橙色的这种色泽哈，非常漂亮。这个太阳翼的安装的位置啊是在哪里？
这个太阳翼的安装的位置是在支月舱的后端，是在支月舱后端通过有一个航架结构，它再装上这个太阳翼的。
在资源舱的后端有一个短短的横架的结构，专门就是用来装太阳翼的。
对，
用横架结构来安装太阳翼的好处是什么？
就是这样的话，它对第一个是安装。比较方便。第二个就是那个，它可以对后面的旋转、对舱体的限制会比较小一点。
这也是我们中国空间站的一种独特的设计，跟国际空间站的设计很不一样。
You can see that the
您可以给大家介绍一下。
Can see that the antenna is fully deployed now. This is not Tianhe. This is real imagery from Wentian.
地方就是联系不大，而咱们太阳翼是要装在。
And you can see that it just entered sunlight. You can still see the darkness that's close to the spacecraft, but now it's just entered sunlight, and so it's starting to harvest energy, I would guess.
所以它必须就是包括咱们支月舱那个为什么设计成一个倒锥形，它就是为了固定太阳翼。只要它然后倾斜的时候，然后能把太阳翼固定。如果是一个直的形状，你看咱那个航架结构比较细，如果这样的话，它就没法去布局了。所以就是为了是这样。
而且将来天河核心舱上的那一对太阳翼哈，也是会拆下来再安装到2个实验舱的这个短横架上。
是的，因为咱们到空间站3。
Yeah, I see that there's some political talk in the chat. So I'm alone. This is a one-man show at the moment. I may try to find a moderator for the next live stream to help me handle things. I don't really know how to do it yet. This is the first live stream, so just let you guys talk, but please avoid the political talk. It's pretty pointless here. And for the next live stream, I'll probably have things sorted out a bit better. Sorry, guys.
好的一个发电效率吧。
我们的实验舱包括天河核心舱采用的都是柔性太阳翼。柔性太阳翼的好处是什么？
是这样，就是柔性太阳翼是相当于是我们太阳翼发展的第3代。那么第1代是刚性的，第2代是半刚性，那第3代是柔性的。那么柔性的太阳翼第一个好处就是最大的好处就是重量比较轻。
Talking about the advantages of the solar arrays, we already mentioned it. It's they call it the 3rd generation solar arrays. It's lighter.
那么这样的话，对于我们航天这个发射来说，这个重量代价是非常有意义的。那么第2个是这个柔性太阳翼，它是可伸展、可收拢的。这样的话为我们后续。
Another advantage is the way it deploys.
维修或者在轨，譬如我们核心舱太阳翼要拆下来放到实验舱1后面的时候，我们就需要把它。
Another advantage is they can move the position of the solar arrays. As mentioned just now, the Tianhe solar arrays will be moved to the tip of the Wentian and Mengtian experimental modules.
就是因为它那个基板那个厚度特别薄，那么它基本上咱们刚性基板的是1/15，那么它们可以折叠的很薄，而且它可以折叠的，就是折叠的面积很薄，而且它折叠的厚度也非常薄。那么它在舱位占用的体积又特别小，这样的话特别有利于我们舱位的一些布局。
那么轻薄的太阳翼，它在恶劣的太空环境当中，怎么样才能够保护自己，然后能够正常工作呢？
是这样，就是咱们一般太阳翼，就是咱们包括基板，包括太阳翼的太阳翼片都做过这样的话空间环境的一些适应性设计，包括从图层上，包括从我们图层上进行了设计，而且在地面也开展了大量的这种地面验证工作，就是保证能够耐受我们空间站10年或者更长的一个时间的一个空间环境适应这种效应的这种危害吧。而且另外就是我们这个太阳翼本身，它太阳片也做了一些就是并列设计，即使空间碎片击穿一片，它其实也不会对我们这个整个影响。对。
好，那这会儿我们看到中国空间站我们看到问天舱，它已经是进入到。
Airlock pointing down. So what does airlock pointing down mean? Cam 35 is asking. It's basically here. It's radial, the radial direction pointing towards the Earth. So that's what I mean when I say pointing down. Because as you say, there's no up down really.
对，我们那个向上侧着，就是有点向上侧抬的，那就是中继天线。那它应该是正在跟踪中继卫星。
然后平铺开去的应该就是太阳翼，
那就是平铺的，向正前方那就是太阳翼。
好，我们再来看另外一个角度的画面。好，我们大家可以听得到，我们现在指挥大厅发出
Successful orbital insertion and the what they call fast docking is going to be 13 hours before it docks with the Chinese space station. Guys, I'm not going to stay 13 hours though. I'm going to see where this CCTV stream goes, and then I might log off in probably 30 minutes tops.
大家看到下面的画面是这个我们看到的是中国空间站内的画面啊，这是航天员的画面，然后上面的这个画面，这个也是从问天舱外拍摄的画面。
对，从问天舱外拍摄的画面，咱们从那个下面可以看到，那就是出舱口。咱们航天员出舱那个，这是气闸舱的一象限。那么从后续咱们航天员从问天舱出舱的时候，就是从这个口，然后出来。
Yeah, you can see the external docking port here. Sorry, the external the airlock hatch. That's just here on Wentian.
航天员陈东和刘洋。他们应该是正在准备。
Jacobs Glenn, what does the station do beside which all? It's an experimental module, so it's dedicated to space sciences. There are experimental racks on the inside. There are 4 life sciences, microgravity. You also have a sort of transversal use rack, and then there are attachment points on the outside to have science experiments that are exposed to the space environment.
是进行了很多次的训练，包括昨天还在进行这方面的练习。虽然只是一个备份，但是也要把技术练到最好。好，非常感谢您这一阶段来为我们解说，谢谢，也感谢您接受我们的。
Another fun fact is the docking should be fully automatic. The taikonauts actually don't really have to do anything, but they did practice remote docking over the past weeks and months. Because if the automation doesn't work, well, you need to have the taikonauts take control and sort of dock automatically, not dock manually with, you can see joysticks and things like that inside the Tianhe core module. And I believe also, ground control can also take over and can perform the docking as a backup of the backup. So just to make sure that everything will go fine. Anonymous viewer is asking when will there be a full complement of 6 taikonauts permanently? There won't be 6 taikonauts permanently. There'll only be 3, and 6 will only be temporary when 3 new astronauts replace the ones that are currently in the space station. We're reviewing the whole history of China's space station and crewed spaceflight program over 30 years. This is the first launch of Shenzhou in 1999. This was uncrewed. First launch of Shenzhou, first launch of the Long March 2F. The Strategy Analysis Center, they mentioned 13 hours to dock to Tianhe, not 6 hours. So 6.5 hours, I think that's for Shenzhou, and 13 hours, apparently this is for Wentian. They still call it fast docking. What we see here is in 2003, the first launch of crewed launch in China, Shenzhou 5 mission with Yang Liwei. This is Shenzhou 6 in 2005. First time they launched 2 astronauts simultaneously. And then Shenzhou 7, sorry, in 2008, the first EVA. Okay, this is Shenzhou 8, the first time that it docks with the Tiangong 1 experimental space station. It's automatic docking. There was no one in Shenzhou at that moment. Now we have Shenzhou 10. And then here, 2016, this is Tiangong 2. They're sending taikonauts on board. 2021, so that's last year, the launch of the Tianhe core module. Lots of great footage. Tianzhou 2 being launched last year, so first time Tianzhou docking with Tianhe, first time that anything is docking with Tianhe. Shenzhou 12 mission lifting off in June last year, so these guys are already back on Earth. They stayed only 3 months. First EVA performed, so this is July 2021. EVA performed by the Shenzhou 12 crew. Lots of firsts. This is landing of Shenzhou, return. The launch of Tianzhou 3 in September last year, bringing supplies for the upcoming Shenzhou 13 crew. This is the Shenzhou 13 crew that's now back on Earth. So these guys were launching, October 2021. These were the first astronauts to stay 6 months continuously on the Chinese space station. Here they are performing an EVA. 感觉良好, that's sort of a joke between astronauts. Long story. You see that? That was the robotic arm moving the astronaut around. This is a live stream that the astronauts did to explain space sciences to the younger generation in China. Here is I missed that. This is radial docking. First time they performed radial docking and undocking of the Shenzhou to the Chinese space station. This is the Shenzhou 13 crew returning after 6 months in space. This is Tianzhou 4 launching in May, and then just last month, this is the Shenzhou 14 crew that's launching. So these are the guys that are on board the space station at this very moment, and they're the ones that are really going to oversee the critical parts of the assembly of the Chinese space station. So Wentian, Mengtian, the displacement possibly of the solar panels, lots of things. Yes, Adam Tai says stop the argue on politics. That would be great. I have no moderators, so I have no control for this launch. I don't really know how to do it, but I don't have time to also read every single comment. But yeah, guys, please, no politics. That'd be great.
那下面我们再为您从多个角度来逐一重现刚才发射的壮观场面。
Reviewing images of the launch just now. I'm going to be streaming for 20 more minutes before stopping. So this is a launch from just now. Very cool.
在距离发射塔架100米处，我们安装了微型摄像机，这里能够直观感受到火箭强大的推力。 它对地面的这种冲击。
Yep. So that's the water vapor that's coming from the launch from the water deluge system. You can see the water deluge system that's just there, that's pouring water beneath the rocket, and then you have the water vapor from the flame trenches on the side. Okay, guys, I'm going to, before I log off, maybe I'll talk a little bit about the commercial rockets that are currently in preparation. So I'm going to get rid of the live stream here because docking is in 12 to 13 hours. This live stream probably won't last that long on CCTV I don't think there's that much that's going to happen. There may be some nice interviews. If you want to watch that in Mandarin, you can go directly to the CCTV or the Bilibili link, and I can send that in the chat if you're interested. Otherwise, I'm just going to talk really briefly about some commercial rockets. Okay, so as I mentioned just now, there are current Chinese rockets, Long March rockets, are not reusable, and they're not going to be reusable until after at least a couple of years. And so that doesn't mean that China is not working on reusable rockets in the short term. And it's actually the private commercial companies that are actually working on that. And so I want to talk about, so China opened its space sector to commercial companies in the past, over the past 8 years, since 2014. And you have a couple of launch companies that have been designing reusable rockets, 15 to 20 that are all going for more or less similar, vertical takeoff, vertical landing, medium lift, liquid fueled rockets. I just want to talk about three of the most promising companies, and these are the companies that you're going to see launching in the coming year or two. So this is really short-term things. Reusable Long March rockets, that's going to be in a while, but for commercial companies, commercial rockets, this is soon. Like what you're seeing here is the first company. It's Land Space. So Land Space was founded in 2015. They're based in Beijing. And what you're seeing here is the Juche 2 liquid fueled rocket. It burns liquid methane, liquid oxygen. And you can see that they're pretty advanced. They fully assembled the rocket, or at least they did such a test in Zhoushan, the Zhoushan Satellite Launch Center in Inner Mongolia. And they're supposed to perform the maiden launch of this medium lift rocket this year. Now, this rocket is not meant to be reusable from day one. It's supposed to be expendable, but Land Space has plans to convert it in the future to a reusable rocket. So it's a two-step process: launching it, putting it in service, and then later on making it reusable. And these are companies, the three that I'm going to mention, they're companies that have raised loads of money. Each of them have at least raised 1 billion RMB. So that's roughly $150 million US, I would guess. And so these three are the most promising ones. They really have, the financial means to do what they want to do in terms of rockets. The Juche 2 performs vertical takeoff, vertical landing, similar to SpaceX's Falcon 9. It would probably use landing legs. All of the three rockets I'm going to mention, three companies, do the same thing. And they're actually still significantly smaller than the Falcon 9. Falcon 9, I think, puts 15 or 20 tons of payload into LEO. For these commercial Chinese companies, they're more aiming in a first step at a couple of tons. So I believe 6 tons into LEO for Land Space. And and for the others I'm going to show, it's also in the same ballpark figure. So that's for Land Space. Now moving on to the second company, which is iSpace, or Interstellar Glory, 星际荣耀, I think in Chinese. And so this company is planning the Hyperbullet 2 that you can see here. Pretty similar to the technical choices of a Falcon 9. You have grid fins, you have landing legs, it's vertical takeoff, vertical landing, and it uses, also similar to the Juche 2, it uses methalox engines, so burning liquid methane and liquid oxygen. And iSpace was founded in 2016, more or less the same as Land Space, and they actually they're pretty advanced as well. But these guys, difference with Land Space is they plan to make their rocket, the Hyperbullet 2, reusable from day one. And so the idea is to do things more like what SpaceX did, what Deep Blue Aerospace is currently doing, is to take the rocket and just the first stage and to perform a vertical takeoff, vertical landing, small hops and make them higher and higher, similar to what SpaceX did with the Grasshopper back in the days. And they're actually doing this at this very moment. I mean, they're preparing to do this. And if I just show a quick slideshow, I may have an image of this. Just let me show you this one second. Let me see if I have this. There we go. And so this image that you have here is the Hyperbullet 2Z. It's the first stage of the Hyperbullet 2, and they should be performing hops also this year. So it's really happening now. Reusability in China, this is something that we're going to see in the next coming 2 years. It's not going to come from the traditional state-owned companies, CAL, the Chinese Academy of Launch Technology. It's apparently coming from the commercial companies. Commercial companies, for them, going for reusability is really an evidence. It's obvious. However, for the Long March rockets, the state-owned ones, they've taken a slightly different strategy, although they're going for reusability on the long term. And then the third company I want to mention, also a very promising one, is Galactic Energy. So these guys are mostly, they're more like... So they're a bit more of a latecomer. They were founded in 2018, but they're also planning the Palace 1 rocket. Same thing, medium lift, liquid-fueled rocket, vertical takeoff, vertical landing. You can see that here it's a sea launch, so I don't know if they're actually planning to do that or not, but that was showed in some marketing material. It's supposed to be reusable from day one, similar to iSpace's Hyperbola 2. One difference, though, is that it uses Kerolox engines, and I think the idea behind that is that Kerolox is more mature technology, and so and it's used on SpaceX. It's proven technology, Falcon 9, and so they're going for something that's proven. Maiden launch is planned for the end of 2023. So that's for the 3 reusable rockets that we should be seeing in the coming 2 years if there are no delays, and possibly even this year for some suborbital hops for iSpace and some expendable launches from land space. So a lot of exciting things that are going on. And I'm just going to wrap up with Long March rockets. And what I want to show next is this slide. I'm going to end the stream on this slide. So this is the Long March 5 DY. So, I was saying just now, CALT, the state-owned players are working on reusable rockets on the long term, not in the very short term like the commercial rockets. So what you're seeing here is a slide that was shown by Long Hao, the chief designer of the Long March rockets. And these guys are, what you're seeing here is China's, it's called Long March 5 DY. DY means 登月, meaning landing on the moon. And so this is China's lunar rocket. It's planned to, I believe I saw the first flight somewhere between around 2016, at least that's what Long Hao said, for the 3-stage version on the left. And it would perform the lunar mission in the 2030s. In 2030, you can see on this image by this slide by Long Hao that you do see, 2 separate launches and a crewed landing and return that's happening. So with 2 launches of this this rocket. And so these are supposed to be reusable, these rockets, from what I've seen from different slides. First launch in 2026. The main reason they're able to do this rather quickly is because when you look at the engines on the slide, the YF-100K, YF-100M, these are the same engines that are currently used on the Long March 5, and so they're just taking existing equipment and they're improving it. The YF-100K, 100M are improvements over the current YF-100 engine, but it's it's existing technology, and they're just putting that together to make a super heavy rocket. You can see that the capabilities to LEO is 70 tons, so this puts it on par with sort of a Falcon Heavy. And you can see that there's actually a crewed version on the right that only has 2 stages, taking off the webcam because I'm hiding it. And so 2-stage version, you can see the launch escape system on the top. And this is because they need a new rocket to launch their NGCS, the next generation crewed spacecraft that's in development. This is a spacecraft that was that's sort of a Chinese equivalent of the Orion spacecraft. It's much bigger. It weighs between 14 to 20 tons, I believe, depending on the configuration. And so they need a new launch vehicle, crewed launch vehicle, a human-rated launch vehicle to launch this spacecraft because the current Long March 2F, it's a very old rocket. It just won't do it. It just doesn't have the payload capacity. And so this is the reusable rockets that we should be seeing in the short term. And it's called Long March 5 DY. I don't think that name's great because it's very different from the Long March 5 DY despite using Long March 5, despite using similar engines. There have been other names. I've seen it called the Long March 5, the 921 rocket, the Long March Falcon Heavy, multiple names. And okay, guys, that is going to be it for now. I'm just going to see if there are any more questions, and then I'm going to log off the live stream, guys. Zhou Xuemin says, where did you get the PPT? Be careful. This is public information. This was shown publicly by Long Hao at Hong Kong University last year. Tim Tim Bryan says if you have reusable rocket boosters, then you should reuse all the scrap metal from the old ships that are scuttled daily to the bottom of the ocean every single day. Reindeer, thanks a lot for the live stream. Thanks, Reindeer, for being here since the beginning of the stream. Time to go. Yes, this Long March 5 DY. I'm honestly excited about the Long March 5 DY. Me too. And it'll push the Long March 5 design to its full potential, absolutely. Ooh, there was support from Ling Shenzhen saying fantastic job on the first live stream. Restful afterwards. Thank you very much, Ling Shen, for your support. I will definitely be resting. I only got a few hours of sleep last night due to, well, the early launch, early for European time. We have, a viewer that's saying, Dongfang Hour, since you cover Asian space, could you cover Hakuto R lunar lander for Japanese iSpace? So I haven't expanded to other topics because, beyond China, because right now Dongfang Hour still is a side hobby. And so I only have time to follow up with the Chinese space program. That's already a huge piece of work, but I would like to expand, yes, to other Asian countries. India's space program, Japanese space program, also potentially the Korean space program. That would be absolutely cool. So that's on the to-do list if I manage to, find an editor for my videos and things like that. What's being said here? Teparanga Himaraya, see you in the next video. Love this live stream. Thank you so much, Teparanga Himaraya. Thank you for supporting on a regular basis the channel. Thank you so much. Anything else? Thank you guys. Good first stream. Almost broke the 2,000 viewer atmosphere. That's pretty crazy, man. I had no idea. I was expecting 20 to 50 to 100 because I feel that YouTube doesn't advertise that much a live stream, and there were many competing live streams on YouTube that were broadcasting what is going on here. So the Wentian live stream. So it's interesting that I managed to get almost over 1,000 viewers. That's great, and that's encouraging to live stream new launches and to help push out some knowledge on the Chinese space sector. Chong Li, looking forward to more coverage about the 921 rocket. I actually have a video from a couple of months ago talking a little bit about that, but I'll probably have a dedicated video on that rocket as soon as we have more confirmed information, maybe some visuals from the Chinese, space, industry that I can share. Lei Tianfang, thank you. Danzel, thank you. Thank you also. Thank you, Alexander. Let me see if there are any other questions, and otherwise I'm going to log off. Strategy and Analysis Center, outstanding live stream, Sean. Thank you. Certainly didn't seem like your first one. I think you got close to 1,000 viewers. Thank you for joining and for watching the live stream. Time to go. Good stream. I'm curious about the cable capture system. I'm not sure what you're referring to there. Sue MZ, thank you for informative live stream. I don't know why there's so many political talk. I don't know why either. Hopefully I can get a moderator to sort that out next time. All right, guys, if there isn't anything else, I'm going to log off. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for supporting the channel. Thank you for those who have donated through Super Thanks. Really hoping to make Dongfang Hour bigger and bigger and cover more and more topics and increase the quality of the videos by getting, custom-made animations and things like that. Possibly, if borders reopen, it'd be nice to go to China and interview also some of these companies that are making Chinese space history. Also comparative videos with equivalent programs from Europe, from the US, from Japan. And really, guys, this has been a blast. We've been doing this. So Dongfang Hour has been here for 2 years now, and it's been really fun to do. It's nice to see that it's also picked up quite a bit of momentum over the past couple of months. So we have a lot of projects that are planned for the coming months, including some merch, but I don't want to talk too much about that. We're going to overhaul probably the website. So a lot of things are planned. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the upcoming videos. Bye-bye.